I still remember that night, even though I tell myself over and over that it was just another routine call. But it wasn't routine. Not really. The kind of nights like that, they leave little cracks in your memory. Little spaces where doubt and fear settle in like dust. It started with the radio. The storm had been building for hours. I was at the station, feet resting on the worn vinyl mat, listening to the rain pound against the roof. The hum of the fluorescent lights above mixed with the low crackle of the police scanner. Most of the calls were minor. Traffic accidents, barking dogs, a few drunks lost in the darkness. But then it came, a report of stalled car on Highway 37. The caller didn't give much information, just that the vehicle was in the middle of the road, and the driver was sitting inside, not moving. I grabbed my jacket and my flashlight, the one with the faint flicker at the top, and headed out. The rain hit me instantly, a sharp, wet sting on my face. The windshield wipers struggled against it, leaving streaks of gray water that made the highway look like a river of shifting shadows. Even with the headlights cutting through the sheets of rain, the world felt washed out, blurred, uncertain. When I first saw the car, I slowed instinctively. It was an old sedan, dark blue, with its hazard lights blinking weakly in the storm. The driver's side window was fogged up, and I could just make out the shape of a man inside. He wasn't moving, not at first. My gut told me something was off before I even stepped out of my car. There was a stillness, a kind of silence that doesn't belong to the night, but to something else entirely. I knocked on the window. Nothing, just the soft patter of rain. I tapped harder. The man's head lifted slightly, but he didn't speak, didn't move beyond that faint tilt. It was almost like he was watching me from somewhere inside himself, somewhere distant. "Hey!" I called, my voice thick with rain and tension. "You need help?" Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. And then I noticed a rear-view mirror. It reflected my own face, pale and soaked, but behind me, I swore I saw another shape, standing in the rain, unmoving, just a shadow among shadows. I blinked, and it was gone. I crouched down and knocked again, softer this time, trying not to startle him. Something in his posture, the way he didn't respond, made the hair on my neck stand up. I've been on Highway 37 100 times before, on nights just like this, and I've never felt this kind of pause in the world, like everything had gone quiet, and only the storm remained. "Sir, are you all right?" I asked. Finally, he moved, just his eyes shifting to meet mine, and that was enough to make me step back. There was no recognition in them, no fear, no confusion, just emptiness, like he was looking past me, through me, at something I couldn't see. I reached for the door again, and the lock clicked open almost on its own. My hand froze midair. That's when I noticed the wet footprints leading from the driver's side into the woods beside the highway. They were fresh, but they didn't belong to the man, or at least I didn't see him anywhere in them. I called it in immediately, giving my location and what I was seeing. The dispatcher's voice was calm on the radio. Too calm. "Stay put. Backup is on the way." But I didn't feel safe staying put. Something about that car, about that man, had already dug into my chest. I shined my flashlight along the road, following the path of the footprints. They led into the trees, swallowed almost instantly by shadows and rain. The wind carried faint sounds, rustling leaves, the soft snap of a branch. But there was something else too, a low hum or maybe a whisper that I couldn't place. The rain soaked me through within minutes. My boot sank slightly into the soft shoulder of the highway, and I kept thinking about the man in the car. Was he real? Had he stepped out before I even noticed? Or had I imagined him entirely? A trick of the fog of my own nerves? But no, the door was unlocked. I had felt it in my hand. I moved closer to the tree line, flashlight sweeping in arcs, heart hammering in my ears. The forest seemed alive in a way a place that's been empty too long can feel alive. Every shadow stretched too long, every sound exaggerated, every branch a possible arm reaching for you. And then, through the rain and the darkness, I saw it. Not him, not a person, but a figure. Tall, impossible, standing just past where the trees thinned. Its head tilted slightly, watching me, not moving in a way a human should. I blinked, and it was gone. I felt my pulse spike, my stomach tighten. Rationally, I knew I should retreat, go back to the car, wait for backup, call in again. But something, curiosity, fear, or maybe the need to understand, kept me rooted in place. I edged forward, and the soft hum grew louder. Or maybe my ears were playing tricks. Maybe it wasn't real. The rain began to taper off slightly, just enough to hear the highway again. Tires splashed somewhere in the distance. A car passing. Normal life continuing as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. There are nights when normal life keeps going, and you're left behind in the cracks, where things move differently. Then I saw him again. The man, standing on the shoulder, closer to the road this time. His posture was unerringly straight. Hands at his sides, head tilted, watching. And for a moment, everything in me froze. Not because of what I saw, but because he seemed wrong. Not wrong like sick or strange. Wrong like reality itself had shifted slightly. And he didn't belong in the world I knew. I called his name, my voice barely audible over the rain now. "Sir." He didn't answer. He didn't move. Just stared, his face pale and smooth. Features almost too symmetrical, too calm, like a mannequin caught in a moment of imitation. Then he stepped forward, just one step, and stopped. I could hear the wet thump of his shoe in the mud. My heart was in my throat. Something inside me screamed to run, to get back to my car, to call it in and never look back. But my feet didn't move. My mind didn't move. I realized that the car hadn't just been stalled. It hadn't been waiting. It had been calling. And somehow, in ways I still can't explain, I had answered. The storm was fading, leaving a cold wind that smelled of wet earth and old leaves. And when I looked again, the man was gone. No footprints, no sign he'd ever been there. Only the empty road glistening in the streetlight and the soft trickle of water in the ditch. I made it back to the car, shaking, soaked through, chest tight. I called it in, explaining what I saw, but my words felt hollow, inadequate. The dispatcher told me to take it easy, that it was probably someone spooked by the storm. But I knew better. I know what I saw. And even now, when I drive that stretch of highway alone, when the rain starts to fall just right, I swear I see him again just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting, watching. The fog had rolled in fast that night, thicker than I'd seen in years. It didn't come quietly, like morning mist, but in a wall, swallowing the streets, turning familiar buildings into dark shapes with edges you couldn't trust. The kind of fog that makes the ordinary feel wrong. I was on patrol, windows down just a crack, rain still lingering on the asphalt from earlier storms. The radio crackled with other officers reporting strange things, shadows flitting across streets, cars stopping where no one should be, doors opening and closing on their own. I tried to focus on my own route, driving slowly, lights cutting through the gray soup, eyes scanning every corner, every alley. But the fog played tricks. Streetlights bent through it, making halos that danced like eyes. Street signs blurred into ghostly shapes. And then, almost at the same time, we all began to hear it. Footsteps. Not muffled, not distant. Clear, deliberate, coming from streets we knew were empty. I slowed, heart ticking up, pulse in my ears. The fog made it impossible to see very far, but the sound was there, pacing ahead of me and then falling behind, as if it was moving around the car. I tapped the radio, but nothing came through except static, low and humming. My partner, Harris, muttered something about kids playing tricks or drunk tourists, but I didn't believe him. Not this time. The first shadow appeared at the edge of the fog. I thought it was a person at first, standing near a lamppost, but the shape didn't move naturally. Too stiff, too deliberate. I blinked, and it seemed closer, now standing on the corner where the street had been empty just moments ago. I could feel my chest tightening, the kind of tension that comes before fear becomes something more. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Harris shrugged, eyes forward. "Probably a tree or sign, man. Fog's playing tricks." But I knew better. Fog can hide things, yes, but it doesn't create them. The shadow moved, sliding across the street like liquid, never stepping over cracks, never breaking form. My breath hitched. I wanted to call it in, tell dispatch what was happening, but the words stuck in my throat, caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. I turned the wheel slowly, trying to follow it, headlights barely piercing the gray. The footsteps came again, closer now, echoing off walls that didn't exist. And then there was a pause, a silence so complete it made the radio hum feel deafening. I looked out my window, and for the first time, I thought I saw a face in the fog, a pale, shifting blur where I should have been. It wasn't human, or at least not any human I'd ever known. Harris noticed too, finally. His voice came in, sharp with unease. What the hell is that? The shadow darted behind a parked car, but it didn't go away. Its movement was impossible, too fast for a person, but deliberate, precise, like it was aware of us, aware of our eyes on it. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. The fog seemed to thicken even more, pressing against the windshield, dripping down in cold, wet fingers that felt like they were crawling across my skin. We followed the street, slow, careful, lights sweeping through the gray. Every turn revealed nothing, and yet the footsteps stayed. Sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, never in the same place twice. I tried to rationalize, try to tell myself it was some local prank or animals, but the sound was too regular, too purposeful. Footsteps that didn't falter, didn't hesitate. Footsteps that knew we were there. The street curved ahead, and there was again a figure, taller than it should have been, thin, draped in fog like a cloak, its head tilted slightly, watching us, and my stomach sank because it didn't move like a person. Its legs didn't bend correctly. And yet, it wasn't gone when I blinked. The outline lingered, haunting the street, waiting for us to approach. Harris swallowed hard beside me. I don't like this. We should turn back. I nodded, trying to ignore the tension clawing up my spine. But my curiosity, that stupid, terrible curiosity, pushed me forward. The car moved a few feet, headlights cutting the mist. The footsteps matched us. We weren't chasing them. They were following, keeping pace, but the street was empty. Nothing moved except the fog itself and the way the shadows flickered along the edges. I wanted to stop to call in, to say I was seeing things, but the radio was dead, just static. And then, in that silence, I heard it, not from outside, but in my head, like someone whispering just behind my mind. Go, it said. Just that one word, long and drawn out, almost a hiss. I froze. Harris noticed immediately, eyes wide. Did you? The shadow flickered again, closer now. I could almost make out details. A face, perhaps, though it wasn't like any face I'd ever seen. Hollow eyes, stretched slightly, lips too thin, mouth barely moving, but I could feel it staring, observing, testing. The footsteps were silent now, replaced by a pressure in my chest, like the fog itself was leaning in, weighing us down. The streetlight above flickered, and for a moment, the shadow multiplied, splitting into pieces, stretching along every street we passed. I turned the wheel, tried to find the end of the fog, the end of the street, but there was no end, just more gray, more shapes, more whispers of movement I couldn't see. We passed a deserted house, windows dark, door closed, but the footsteps stopped, and then I saw it. Inside, moving past the glass, a figure pacing the hallway, not like a person, but like a memory of a person. And when I blinked, the hallway was empty again, but the sense of being watched stayed, curling around my spine, squeezing. I realized we were going in circles. Every turn led to another fog-choked street. Every street seemed identical, like the town had folded in on itself. And the shadow, the footsteps, the whispers, they were always just behind, always aware, always waiting. Harris leaned closer, voice low and urgent. We need to leave. We can't. This isn't right. I wanted to agree. I wanted to drive straight to the station, to pull back, to erase everything from memory. But something kept me in place, a pull I couldn't explain, a need to see the shadow clearly, to understand why it was following us, why it was here. Then it moved closer, slipping in front of the car, and for the first time I saw it fully. Not human, too tall, too thin. Features wrong in ways I couldn't describe, like someone had taken a reflection of man and stretched it over reality. It tilted its head, and I swear I felt it smile, or at least the idea of a smile, something cruel and patient, waiting for me to break. The footsteps returned, now loud, echoing off buildings that weren't there, reverberating inside my chest. And then they stopped, dead silence. Only the rain, only the fog, only the streetlights humming weakly overhead. I looked around. The shadow was gone. Harris was pale, shaking. I was shaking. The fog thinned slightly, enough for the headlights to catch the empty street, the empty houses, the empty alleys. Nothing had been there. Nothing remained, except the sound of wet shoes on asphalt, still echoing faintly in my ears, long after we had turned the corner and driven away. Even now, when the fog rolls in thick, I swear I hear it again. Footsteps on streets where no one should be walking. Shadows at the edges of my vision. Watching, waiting, patient. And I remember that night. The way the fog swallowed everything and left only that feeling behind. The sense that the world is bigger, stranger, and darker than I've ever dared admit. Sometimes, I can't help but think it wasn't following us. Maybe it was waiting for the next car drive into the mist. The next pair of eyes to blink and see it. And maybe, just maybe, it's still there, moving silently along abandoned streets, counting footsteps, keeping time with the rain. I had been on the road for hours that night, the kind of shift where time stretches and bends, and the town itself feels like it's holding its breath. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective, mirrors for the dim glow of streetlights. Fog lingered in the corners, but was thinner now, just enough to blur edges, make the ordinary feel slightly wrong. I was alone in my cruiser, the radio crackling softly, nothing out of the ordinary, until it wasn't. At first, it was just a whisper, buried beneath the static. I leaned closer, thinking maybe I had caught a nearby officer calling in, a stray transmission bouncing across the frequencies. But it wasn't like that. The voice was garbled, broken into pieces, like it had been dragged through a storm. I could catch a word here or there. Stop, watch, left lane, but nothing that made sense in context. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. Static. I muttered to myself, just static. But it kept coming, growing slightly louder, threading itself through the radio with the kind of persistence that makes your skin crawl. I tried changing channels, tuning out, but it always returned, faint at first, then clearer, almost deliberate. And then I realized something. The words, they weren't random. They weren't just static broken into letters. They were telling me things that were happening right outside my car, in real time. Red light, approaching, the voice whispered. My stomach dropped. I looked ahead and saw it. A traffic light, normally green, flickering as if dying, then switching to red just as I reached it. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself it was coincidence, timing, my mind playing tricks. But then it happened again. Stop, rear view. I glanced in the mirror, and there it was, a sedan creeping along behind me, headlights dim, following at exactly the wrong distance. My heart thudded. I tried to rationalize, tried to tell myself maybe it was another officer or a local driver, but the timing, the words, it couldn't be chance. I gripped the wheel tighter, feeling my pulse spike. I called dispatch, voice type, Unit 7. Something's wrong with the radio. Voices instructions. They're predicting things. Static answered me. That was it. No calm voice, no reassurance. Just static, and in the background, faintly, almost teasing, I could hear the same garbled phrases, stitched together in a rhythm I didn't recognize. I kept driving, headlights cut into the fog, but the streets began to feel unnatural, like a loop, like they were repeating. Corners I had passed before appearing again, subtly different but unmistakably the same. And always, the radio murmuring, whispering words that matched the world outside. Right, puddle slow. I braked instinctively, hard in my throat, avoiding a slick patch that had appeared from nowhere. My mind raced. How could this be? Voices predicting the road ahead. The hazards I couldn't see until they were described first. Logic refused to cling. My hands shook as the rain began again. Tiny droplets smattering the windshield. Left shadow behind. I glanced in the side mirror. There was movement there, something at the edge of the fog, sliding along the curb like liquid, too fast, too deliberate. My pulse spiked, and the radio hissed again. Closer, watching, I swallowed hard. trying to stay calm, trying to hold on to reality I knew. But the voice didn't stop. It wasn't giving directions. It was narrating, predicting, shaping. And the worst part was how accurate it was. Every word, every warning, came true moments later, leaving me reeling, unable to ignore it. I pulled over, finally, hands trembling. I shut off the radio. But even in the silence, the words echoed faintly in my mind. My head throbbed, my stomach twisting. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't rationalize it. And then I realized I had seen this before. Or rather, I had heard it before in fragments, in stories told by older officers about strange nights on Highway 37, nights when the world felt wrong. I turned the radio back on. Static. And then, almost impossibly, the words came again. Clearer this time, deliberate. Do not leave, shadow waits, turn now. My chest tightened. I wanted to argue, to resist, to dismiss it, but my body obeyed. I turned, following some invisible instruction, even as dread pooled in my stomach. The street weaved unnaturally, like the fog itself was bending the road, twisting reality around me. And then I saw the shadow, a tall figure, thin, moving at the edge of visibility, keeping pace with the car, never fully materialized, yet undeniably present. I tried call dispatch again. Nothing. My voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the static that now filled every channel. And then the whispering became almost rhythmic, insistent. It wasn't just the radio anymore. It was everywhere. The hum of the tires on wet asphalt, the whisper of the rain against the windshield. Even inside my own head. Faster, follow bay. I blinked, trying to separate thought from reality, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But the shadow kept pace. And then I realized something far worse. It wasn't just following me, it was guiding me. The voice, the radio, the fog. It was shaping everything, moving me along a path I couldn't see. Every instinct screamed to stop, to fight, to turn around. But I couldn't. Every streetlight, every curve, every reflective puddle seemed to pulse with meaning. And the voice, garbled and broken, kept narrating, commenting, directing, making me feel like I was trapped in a story I hadn't agreed to be part of. Do not stop, he watches, turn now. I followed, trembling. My eyes darted at every reflection, every shadow, every edge of fog. The town felt wrong, like a memory of a place, familiar but twisted, haunted by itself. And with every turn, every step of the road, the voice was right. It had predicted each hazard, each shadow, each heartbeat of fear. Eventually, I reached the overpass, the part of town where the streetlights barely reached, and the fog thickened again. The voice on the radio paused, leaving only static and the sound of my own breathing. And then, clear, as if from behind my right shoulder, it whispered one final warning. Do not look back. I wanted to. I wanted to see who or what was there just beyond the edge of understanding. My muscles coiled, ready to bolt, ready to run. But my mind obeyed the whisper. I didn't look back. I drove the rest of the way in silence, the fog slowly thinning as the town returned to its normal shape. When I finally made it back to the station, the radio was normal again, crackling chatter, routine reports, nothing strange. But I knew what I had heard, what I had obeyed, and what had guided me through that fog-shrouded night. Even now, I can't bring myself to explain it. I've tried. I've told other officers, friends, anyone who will listen, and they look at me like I've lost it, like my mind twisted a normal night into a story. But I remember every word, every whisper, every prediction. I remember the way the fog pressed against the car, the way the radio seemed alive, almost hungry, almost aware. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it again, not from a radio, not from anything real, but in the edges of my thoughts, when the world goes quiet and the night stretches long. And I know, in the deep, sinking part of me, that the voices are still out there, waiting to speak, waiting to guide, waiting for the next person who will follow without question. The night had settled into a kind of quiet that felt unnatural, the way a town holds its breath when something isn't right. The fog had lifted, but the streets were slick with leftover rain, reflecting the dull glow of streetlights that seemed weaker than they should have been. Harris and I were on patrol, still rattled from the previous calls and the radio voices. Every instinct screamed that something was off, that the night had more to show us than it should. It was Harris who first spotted it. A car, sitting in the middle of the Tulane Road, headlights off, engine silent. At first, I thought it was a vehicle from the stalled call, the one from Highway 37. But this didn't make sense. That car should have been towed hours ago, or at least gone from where we first left it. And besides, this wasn't just abandoned. It was perfectly positioned, as if someone had placed it there to be seen. "Do you see that?" Harris whispered, his voice tight, eyes wide. I did. And I didn't. There was something impossible about it. Something that twisted the rational part of my mind. The car was old, maybe a 97 or 98 model, and it looked familiar, though I couldn't place it. The kind of familiarity that makes you glance twice, heart tightening. We slowed, headlights cutting through the darkness, casting long shadows across the asphalt. The car didn't move, didn't make a sound. I reached for my radio, but the channel was silent. Not the usual chatter, not static, just silence. "Should we check it out?" Harris asked, voice shaking slightly. I wanted to say yes, to approach and find answers, but the rational part of me hesitated. Something in that stillness didn't feel right. I stepped out of the cruiser, rain-damp hair clinging to my forehead. My boots made soft splashes on a wet road. The air smelled of wet asphalt and something metallic, faint, almost like old blood. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, highlighting the car in uneven arcs, making the shadows dance across the street. The closer I got, the more I noticed the details. The car was empty. Keys in the ignition, engine cold. Nothing moved inside, but the doors were locked. And the strange thing, it felt recent. The kind of presence you notice when something is left behind, but was never meant to be left at all. Harris came up beside me, peering in through the window. "Nobody in there," he said, voice barely a whisper. I nodded, though my stomach was twisting. I felt it first in my chest, then in my fingers, then in the back of my neck. A presence. Something watching, waiting just outside of sight. My flashlight flicked across the hood, across the windshield, and for a moment, I swore I saw a face, pale and shifting, looking back at me. I blinked, and it was gone. I circled the car slowly, every nerve screaming. The engine wasn't running. The lights weren't on, yet the tires were clean, wet from the rain, as if someone had just driven it here moments ago. But the street had been empty when we passed a few minutes earlier. I couldn't reconcile it. I checked the license plate. Familiar, though I couldn't remember why. Something deep in my memory tugged at me. A recollection of a car like this, a call long ago, a report filed late at night. And then I realized the registration matched a vehicle that had been reported missing over a year ago. Not last week, not yesterday. Over a year. I felt my stomach drop. "Harris, this car has been missing. A long time." He looked at me, pale in the glow of my flashlight. "But how? How did it get here?" I shook my head. No answer. Nothing made sense. The car just sat there in the middle of the street, perfectly placed, perfectly ordinary, yet entirely wrong. I wanted to reach for the door handle, to open it, to find out what had happened, but my hand hovered in midair. A voice in my head whispered, not from radio this time, but from somewhere inside, a warning I couldn't ignore. Don't touch it. The fog, or what little remained, swirled along the edge of the road. And then I noticed something else. Footprints, barely visible, leading away from the car toward the side of the street. They were small, almost childlike, though too perfect, too measured. They disappeared into the fog as quickly as they appeared, as if they had been drawn there for a moment and then erased. I called dispatch, voice tight. "Unit 7, we have a vehicle," appeared out of nowhere, empty. Static answered me. Not the normal crackle, but a low hum, vibrating in my chest. And then, faintly, I thought I heard the car's horn, a soft, short beat, but when I looked at the vehicle, it didn't move. Nothing had changed, and when I looked around, the street behind me was empty, just wet asphalt, dark buildings, and the edge of fog. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. Logic should have been enough. Cars don't appear out of nowhere. Missing vehicles don't come back after a year. And yet, There it was, parked exactly where it shouldn't be, staring back at me with its empty interior and cold engine. Harris shifted beside me. "We should leave," he said, voice low, urgent. "Now." I nodded, though my curiosity gnawed at me, cold and persistent. Something about this night, this stretch of road, refused to let me turn away. But instinct screamed at me, the kind of instinct that has saved me before, warning me that some things aren't meant to be touched, seen, or understood. I moved back toward the cruiser, flashlights sweeping the fog. The car seemed to shimmer slightly at the edges, almost like it wasn't entirely real, like reality had frayed for a moment and the missing vehicle had slipped through. I could almost hear it breathing, quiet and measured, and I felt an itch in the back of my mind, like a memory I shouldn't remember. We got in the car, doors clicking, engine rumbling to life under my hands. I kept my eyes on the vehicle as we pulled away slowly, headlights illuminating it for the last moment, and then, as if it had never been there, it vanished. Not driving off, not hidden by shadows, just gone. The road behind us was empty. No tires, no trace, no evidence that it had ever existed. Harris let out a long breath, voice shaky. Did we just see that?" I didn't answer. My stomach was still twisting. My mind raced through every explanation, every rational thought, every memory of cars, reports, missing vehicles. None of it fit, and deep down I knew nothing could. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. We drove the same streets, checked the usual spots, but nothing appeared again. No cars, no shadows, no whispers. Only the sense that the night had shifted, that we had glimpsed a fold in reality. Something just out of reach, waiting. Even now, months later, I can't stop thinking about it. Driving alone, I check the roads at night in my mind, the empty streets, the fog, and I wonder if the car is still out there somewhere, waiting for the next person to find it. Or maybe it's gone, existing only in memory, in the cracks between what we see and what we believe. I can't explain it, and I doubt I ever will. But the feeling, the way the air changed, the weight of the unseen, the impossibility of what we saw, it hasn't left me. And I know, deep down, that some nights, Highway 37 still carries it, silently, perfectly empty, waiting for someone else to question what is real. I remember that night like it's carved into my memory, even though I keep telling myself it was just another routine call. But routine doesn't feel like this. Not really. There's a weight to it, a quiet that sticks in your bones. And that night had it in spades. It started with the radio. The storm had been building all evening. Dark clouds rolling in fast. Lightning flicking across the horizon like a warning. I was at the station, leaning back in my chair, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. The scanner hummed with the usual mix of minor disturbances. Traffic accidents, barking dogs, the occasional drunk wandering the streets. But then it happened. A call came through about a stalled car on Highway 37. That was it. No details. Just a lone vehicle sitting in the middle of the road. The driver supposedly motionless inside. I grabbed my jacket, my flashlight, and headed out. The rain hit me the moment I stepped outside, cold and sharp, soaking my hair and running down my neck. The wiper struggled against it, leaving streaks of gray water that made the highway look like a river. Even with the headlights cutting through the storm, the world seemed blurred, uncertain. When I saw the car, I slowed immediately. It was an old blue sedan, hazard lights blinking weakly through the rain. The driver's side window was fog, and inside, I could just make out a man. He wasn't moving at first. There was something about the stillness that set my nerves on edge. It wasn't just the storm or the dark. It was the way the world seemed to pause around him. I knocked on the window. Nothing. The rain pounded harder, drumming on the roof like a warning. I tapped again, louder. The man's head lifted slightly, a subtle movement. But he didn't speak, didn't shift beyond that faint tilt. It felt wrong. "Hey," I said, my voice thick with rain and tension. "You need help?" Still nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked, and then out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw another shape standing in the rain, a shadow among shadows. I blinked, and it was gone. I knocked again, quieter this time, trying not to startle him. The tilt of his head, the emptiness in his eyes, made the hair on my neck rise. I patrolled this highway dozens of nights, alone in worse weather, and I've never felt that pause in the world before. Like everything had gone still, and only the storm remained. "Sir, are you all right?" I asked. His eyes shifted toward mine. Just a flicker. No fear, no confusion, nothing human at all. It was like he was somewhere else entirely. I reached for the door again. The lock clicked open as if on its own. My hand froze. That's when I noticed the wet footprints leading from the driver's side into the woods beside the highway. Fresh. And yet, I didn't see him anywhere along them. I called in, giving my location, describing the scene. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Too calm. "Stay put. Backup is on the way." But calm wouldn't keep me safe. Something about that car, about that man, had already dug into me. I shone my flashlight along the road, following the faint path into trees. The footprints disappeared into shadows and fog. The wind carried faint noises, rustling leaves, snapping branches. But there was something else too, a low hum, maybe a whisper, just out of reach. The rain soaked me quickly, boots sinking into the soft shoulder. I thought again of the man in the car. Was he real? Had he stepped out before I even noticed? Or had I imagined him entirely? But the door had been unlocked. I had felt it. I moved closer to the tree line, flashlight sweeping in slow arcs, heart hammering. The forest felt alive in a way abandoned places do. Every shadow stretched, every sound exaggerated, every branch a possible arm. And then I saw it. Not him, not exactly. Just a figure, tall, unmoving, standing at the edge of the fog, head tilted slightly, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. My pulse spiked. My stomach tightened. Rationally, I knew I should retreat. Return to the car. Wait for backup. Call in again. But something kept me there. Curiosity, fear, or just a need to understand, keeping me rooted. I edged forward. The hum, or whisper, grew louder. Or maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was a storm playing tricks. The fog pressed in. I caught movement in the rearview mirror. Shapes shifting, fleeting, impossible. My mind raced, trying to grasp what I was seeing. The car hadn't just been stalled. It hadn't been waiting. It had been calling. And somehow, in ways I can't explain, I had answered. The storm began to fade, leaving a cold wind that smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. I glanced back, and the man was gone. No footprints, no trace, nothing, just the empty road glistening in the streetlight. I made it back to the cruiser, soaked, shaking. I called it in, reporting what I'd seen, but the words felt hollow, inadequate. The dispatcher suggested it was just someone spooked by the storm. I didn't believe it. Even now, when I drive that stretch of highway alone, when the rain begins to fall just right, I swear I see him again, just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting, watching, some nights. I wonder if he's still there, waiting for the next call in the rain. I had never been particularly religious, but I knew enough about the cemetery to respect it. Old stones, worn and leaning, names fading into time. The mausoleum at the far end was something else entirely. It wasn't large, but it had a presence, a weight that pressed against the air, thick and unmoving. I was there that night on patrol, a routine check, or at least I told myself it was routine. But nothing about that night felt routine. The air was damp, the fog clinging low over the graves, my boots pressed into soft, wet earth as I approached the mausoleum. Even with my flashlight cutting through the darkness, the building seemed to absorb light, swallowing the beam before it reached the door. I paused, the hairs on my neck rising. There was a stillness here that went beyond the absence of life. It felt deliberate, waiting. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft, barely audible, curling around the stones. I froze, straining to listen. My name, just a syllable, a fragment, but unmistakable. Our eyes. I spun around. Nothing, just gravestones, fog, and the night settling into itself. My pulse spiked. I tried to rationalize. Wind through the trees, leaves brushing against each other, echoes carrying in the cold air. But it wasn't right. It was my name, spoken softly but with intention. I stepped closer to the mausoleum, flashlight shaking slightly in my hands. Another whisper, closer now, echoing from somewhere within. Our eyes. I swallowed, heart hammering. This was impossible. No one should be here. I should be alone. I checked the perimeter. Nothing. The cemetery stretched in all directions, silent except for the whispering that now seemed to come from inside the building. I hesitated at the threshold. Cold stone, smooth and dark, pressed against my fingertips. I leaned closer, breath fogging the air. Another whisper, this time more distinct, almost like a sentence broken into fragments. Our eyes come inside. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to call it in, to run back to the cruiser. But something kept me rooted. Curiosity, fear, or maybe the arrogance of a man who thinks he can face anything. I stepped inside. The mausoleum smelled of dust and decay, damp stone pressing in on every side. My flashlight beam swept across sarcophagi, names carved centuries ago fading under layers of grime. Shadows moved at the edges of the light, stretching along the walls in impossible angles. And then I heard it again. My name, whispered, soft, multiple times, overlapping. Our eyes, our eyes. I froze, convinced my mind was breaking. But the sound was too precise, too deliberate. And then I realized it was coming from all directions. From above, below, behind the stone coffins. It was close, intimate, and it made my skin crawl with familiarity I couldn't explain. I took a careful step forward. Each footfall echoed, soft against the stone floor. The whispers followed, shifting with me, circling me. And then, just for a moment, I thought I saw a figure, pale, blurred, standing at the far end of the hall. I blinked, gone. My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice stuck in my throat. Every instinct in me screamed that this was wrong, that I shouldn't be here. But the whispers, they were pulling at me, insistent, patient. Our eye closer. I moved toward the source, flashlight trembling. The closer I got, the louder the whispers became, until they layered over each other, almost a chant. I could make out fragments now. Come, don't be afraid, your name. I wanted to run, but my feet obeyed. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was like the air itself guided me forward, the sound of my name threading through the stone, curling around my thoughts, binding me. The figure returned, this time closer, just at the edge of the light. I could almost see its face, though it was blurred, featureless, like a memory half remembered. And it whispered again, directly into my mind, not my ears. Our eyes. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. My hand slipped, flashlight clattering across the stone floor. Shadows jumped along the walls. The whispers became a rush, overlapping, chaotic. Our eyes don't leave. Our eyes follow. I scrambled to retrieve the flashlight. The figure was gone. The whispers continued, softer now, patient, coaxing. I felt the mausoleum breathing around me, the air thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. Every step I took seemed to echo in rhythm with my heartbeat. The sound of my name followed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I reached the center of the hall. The air felt colder here, the stone colder beneath my fingertips. And then it hit me. The whispers weren't just calling me. They were remembering me. Every memory I had of this town, of nights alone on patrol in the rain, of Highway 37. They threaded together into the sound of my name. It was intimate, invasive, almost unbearable. I wanted to leave, to escape the building, the whispers, the weight pressing down on me. But each step back was mirrored by the echoing of my name, faster now, overlapping, a chorus of voices that knew me, that had been waiting for me to hear them. Our eyes don't run. Our eyes come closer. I stumbled toward the exit, flashlight swinging, shadows fling along the walls. The whispers followed, patient, teasing, layering over themselves, growing insistent. And then, just as suddenly as it started, they stopped. Silence fell, thick and absolute, broken only by my own ragged breathing. Outside, the fog had thickened again, low and creeping over the graves. I stumbled to the cruiser, hands shaking, heart racing. I tried to call in, tried to explain the voices, the figure, the way my own name had been spoken as if by the walls themselves. The radio remained dead. Nothing but static. Even now, weeks later, I can hear it. Not the literal whispers, but the memory of them, threaded through every quiet moment. My name, soft and patient, curling through my thoughts. And I know deep down that it's waiting for me to return, to hear it again, to step inside the mausoleum and let the voices speak once more. Some nights, when the wind moves just right through the gravestones, I swear I hear it again, just a soft whisper of my name, carried on the cold night air, persistent and patient, waiting for me. I didn't want to return to the cemetery that night. I told myself I was done with it, that the whispered names had been a one-time thing, a trick of the mind after long hours on patrol. But the call came through just as darkness was settling over the town, the kind of call that made your chest tighten before you even understood why. A trespasser reported seeing figures among the graves, moving between the tombstones. Figures, they said, but they're wrong. Not right. I drove out there, headlights cutting through fog, every inch of the road glistening with leftover rain. By the time I reached the cemetery, the mist had rolled back in, hugging the stones, curling along the paths like fingers. I parked near the wrought iron gates and took my flashlight, the beam weak against a thick gray night. The place smelled of damp earth, moss, and something older, something beneath the surface that made my stomach knot. The first thing I saw was movement, or what I thought was movement. Figures, standing among the graves, barely visible, framed by the fog. I froze. My pulse spiked. They didn't move. Not a twitch, not a breath, not even a sway in the wind. And yet, they were unmistakably human. Tall, thin, heads tilted slightly as if listening, watching. I want to call it in, to tell dispatch someone was out there, but something stopped me. Fear, yes, but also the sense that if I spoke, I would get them attention they were waiting for. I moved slowly, each step deliberate, crunching on gravel and wet leaves. The figures didn't respond. They didn't flinch. They were too still, too patient, too deliberate. And there was something wrong. Subtle at first, but undeniable. The proportions, the way their limbs bent, too straight, too rigid. The way their heads turned slightly when my light swept over them, but not naturally. They were human, but not human. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. My flashlight swept across the nearest figure, pale skin glimmering faintly in the beam, clothes that looked worn, decades old maybe, but somehow clean. Its face, I tried not to focus, but my eyes betrayed me, was featureless or almost featureless, like the shadow of a person or a memory of one. My chest tightened. I wanted to look away, but something rooted me in place, a combination of curiosity, fear, and a primal need to see, to understand. The fog shifted, and with it, the figures seemed to stretch, slide, rearrange themselves between the tombstones, not moving in a normal way, more like shifting through the edges of reality, materializing and dematerializing in the space between the stones. I blinked, and one had disappeared, only to reappear several steps over, closer than before. My pulse was hammering. I whispered to myself, stay calm, but my voice sounded strange in the thick, cold air. I edged forward, flashlight trembling. The figures multiplied, or maybe my mind multiplied them. They were everywhere now, lined along the paths, hiding just at the edge of vision. The unnatural stillness of their posture pressed down on me, and I realized my chest ached with tension. Every instinct told me to run, to leave, to abandon curiosity and escape the cemetery entirely. But something compelled me forward. One of them, or perhaps the same one I had glimpsed before, tilted its head toward me. That tilt, subtle, deliberate, unnaturally patient, made me freeze. I could feel it watching me, studying me, reading something I didn't want to expose. My flashlight flickered. For a heartbeat, darkness filled the beam, and then it returned, but the figure was closer. Too close. I stumbled backward, heart racing. The gravel crunched sharply under my boots, echoing through the empty cemetery. But the figures didn't react. They didn't flinch. Their stillness was deliberate, unnerving, as though they were waiting for me to make the next move, waiting for me to break. I tried to rationalize. Perhaps it was someone playing a prank. Maybe a group of kids dressed strangely. but my mind rebelled against that explanation. No human could stand so still, so patiently in the cold, wet night without moving, without shivering, without breathing. And the way they had appeared, the way they seemed to shift through the fog, it was impossible. I scanned the gravestones. Names, dates, old and new, some faded beyond recognition. And then I noticed that some of the figures aligned unervingly with the tombstones, as if each one had been positioned with care intentionally, a grotesque mimicry of life and death together, playing out in perfect stillness. A faint sound drew my attention, soft, almost inaudible, a whisper, a sigh, the brushing of fabric against stone. I swung my flashlight toward it. One of the figures hadn't moved, just a step, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my stomach lurch. I want to call out to demand who's there, but my voice faltered, swallowed by the fog. They began to spread subtly, gliding between stones, aligning themselves with the paths, moving closer, but never breaking the impossible stillness. Their movements were deliberate, precise, wrong, and the closer they got, the more I felt the air thicken around me, pressing against my skin, my lungs. Every breath tasted of damp stone and something older, something patient, ancient. I remembered the whispers from the mausoleum, the names softly spoken in the dark, and suddenly I realized I could almost hear them again. Not words, not phrases, but the weight of attention, of being watched, of being named without knowing it. My heartbeat accelerated, each beat echoing through my ears, matching the rhythm of something unseen. I took another careful step backward, tripping slightly over root, and my flashlight wobbled. The beam landed on one figure squarely, pale, tall, unnervingly still, and it tilted its head again. My name, my own name, flitted through my mind, unbidden, soft, almost teasing, as though the figure, the cemetery, the fog itself had learned it. Fear gripped me fully now. Not the quick, sharp fear of a startled jump, but the slow, creeping kind that digs into your chest and curls around your ribs. I realized I had no control, no escape. The cemetery, the tombstones, the shadows, they had rewritten the rules. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I was part of the night now, a participant in some patient observation, measured, deliberate, unnerving. I stumbled toward the cruiser, trying to keep my eyes on the figures without staring directly, trying to keep them in my peripheral vision. Each shadow remained perfectly still, each one unnervingly human, each one impossible. The fog seemed to shift, breathing, curling around the stones, folding the cemetery into itself, hiding paths, extending distances. I felt disoriented, trapped in a space that wasn't quite real, yet tangible, solid under my boots. By the time I reached the vehicle, I was shaking, drenched in cold sweat and rain. I glanced back over the hood. One figure remained at the edge of the light, just beyond the last tombstone, standing, waiting, watching, its head tilted toward me. I couldn't tell if it was patient or hungry, or if such distinctions even applied here. I started the engine slowly, leaving the cemetery behind, but the sense of being observed didn't fade. The fog lingered. The shadows between the stones persisted in my mind. Even now, thinking back, I can feel them, standing at the edges of my vision, in the corners of quiet streets, in the dark patches between streetlights. I don't know what they were. Human, but wrong. Alive, but not alive. Patient, deliberate, and impossibly still. All I know is that once you see them, once you notice the wrongness in their stance, the misalignment in their limbs, the way they stand where they shouldn't, something in you changes. You carry a piece of that night with you, a shadow that doesn't leave, a chill that creeps into your thoughts long after the fog has lifted. Some nights, I think about returning, thinking I could confront them, understand. But I know better. The cemetery is patient. It waits. And those shadows, they wait with it, watching, perfectly still, human, and yet impossibly wrong. I thought leaving the cemetery would be simple. I thought the hard part was over. The whispers, the shadows, the impossibly still figures among the tombstones. I thought that once I reached the gates, the nightmare would end. But I was wrong. The fog had grown thick again, settling low to ground like a living thing, curling around gravestones, around the paths, around me. My boots sank slightly into the damp soil, as I made my way back to the wrought iron gates. My flashlight trembled in my hand, the beam cutting through the gray nothingness, barely illuminating the entrance. And then I saw it. The gates were closed. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe someone had locked them earlier, a caretaker finishing his rounds. But as I approached, reaching out to push them open, I realized the lock was already engaged. I hadn't seen it before. No padlock, no chain, just the gates themselves solid, unyielding, impossible to open. I tugged, rattled, pressed my weight against them, and nothing budged. My heart pounded, a steady thrum echoing in my ears. Something wasn't right. The air around me felt heavier, thicker, charged with an unseen tension. I turned back toward the path I'd just walked. The fog had shifted, thickened in a way that made the tombstones and the shadows between them impossible to distinguish. And that's when I noticed it. Movement, or maybe not movement, more like an intention, a presence in the fog that wasn't there before. I squinted through the mist, flashlight beam cutting jagged lines through the gray. Figures, or shapes, stood just beyond the tombstones, tall, thin, unmoving, but somehow aware. I could feel it. Every hair on my arms lifted, my chest tightened, my stomach twisting in that familiar knot of fear that tells you, you are not alone. I called out, voice shaking. Hello? Anyone there? This is the sheriff's office. My words seemed swallowed immediately, absorbed by the fog, returned to me as muffled echoes that made my throat tighten further. No answer, no response, just the pressure of being watched, of being observed in a way that was intimate and terrifying. I took a step back, then another, tried to gauge my surroundings, trying to figure out what had changed in the brief moments since I passed through. The path was unrecognizable. Shapes shifted between tombstones, subtle, almost imperceptible, heads tilted slightly, bodies leaning in ways that seemed just off enough to unsettle me completely. The fog moved with them, or maybe they moved with it. I couldn't tell that. I reached for my radio, fumbling with the buttons. Dispatch! This is Unit 7, requesting assistance. Gates are locked. I don't know what's happening. Static answered me, not the normal kind, not just interference. A low hum undercut by faint whispers, rising and falling, overlapping, layered, almost as if the night itself were speaking my name. I dropped the radio, heart hammering, feeling my own breath shake in the cold air. The fog thickened, and suddenly I could barely see the gates. Just low shapes, dark outlines, and the creeping sensation that I was being herded, corralled into the center of the cemetery. My pulse raced. Every instinct screamed to run, to break through, to fight. But something in the night pressed against me, heavy and patient. The shadows among the tombstones were watching, waiting, and I had no idea how to escape. I circled the gates, flashlight trembling, inspecting the ironwork. No chains, no locks, nothing. Yet they wouldn't open. My hands pressed against the cold metal, slippery from fog and sweat. But the gates were immovable. Something held them shut, something unseen and deliberate. The whispers returned, soft at first, curling around my ears, threading to the fog, and then sharper, more precise. My name, again, not shouted, not aggressive, just knowing. Owl eyes, they seemed to come from everywhere, from the gravestones of fog, the air itself. I staggered back, heart hammering, realizing I was encircled. The figures between the tombstones had moved closer, not rushing, not walking, simply shifting, always keeping the distance just enough to remain untouchable, unervingly patient. I tried to steady my breathing. Rational thought was useless here. None of this made sense. The gates shouldn't be locked. The cemetery shouldn't feel alive. The shapes shouldn't behave like they were aware, calculating, waiting. And yet, here I was trapped, the weight of the night pressing on my shoulders, the fog curling around my boots, the whispers threading through my mind. I thought about the patrol car, about driving away, about calling in again, but my hand shook too badly to operate the keys. And even if I could drive, the fog seemed to stretch in every direction, folding the cemetery in on itself. It wasn't just the gates, it was the entire space. Reality itself felt wrong. I stepped back from the gates, shining my flashlight on the path I had just walked. One figure stood at the edge, head tilted, pale and featureless in the light. Another appeared behind a gravestone, leaning slightly as if peeking. The shadows among the tombstones were no longer stationary. They had begun to align, a slow, deliberate choreography that made my stomach churn. I swallowed hard. My name again, whispered, layered over itself, coming from multiple directions. Our eyes don't leave. Our eyes stay. The words weren't just heard. They were felt, pressing into my chest, into my mind, twisting logic and reason to something impossible. I tried the gates again. Same result. Immovable. My flashlight trembled, beam cutting frantic arcs through the fog. The figures shifted with every sweep, always just at the edge of vision. Too human to ignore, too wrong to comprehend. I stumbled backward, boots slipping in the mud, heart hammering. The whispers grew louder, layered with faint, almost imperceptible sounds. Footsteps, soft scraping along stone, the rustle of fabric, the sigh of a breath that wasn't mine. And then I saw it, a figure moving closer, slow, deliberate head tilted, eyes fixed on me. Panic surged. I ran, turning away from the gates, towards what I hoped was a path out. The fog swallowed me, twisting the world, folding distances, confusing my sense of direction. The figures followed, not running, just shifting, a silent, patient pursuit. The whispers pressed closer, threading my own memories, calling me by name, tugging at the edges of my mind. I stumbled again, boots sinking into soft earth, and the flashlight went out. Darkness swallowed me. My breath came in ragged gasps. I fumbled for the switch. Light returned, shaking, flickering, and I caught glimpses. Figures everywhere, surrounding me now, perfectly still, unnervingly human, impossible. I screamed. My own voice seemed weak, swallowed by the night. The gates were still there, impossibly locked, standing silent and unyielding. The fog thickened. The shadows leaned in, and the whispers, my name, curled through the air and into my skull. I don't remember how long I stood there, paralyzed between the weight of fear and the instinct to survive. When the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, the fog thinned slightly, and the figures began to fade. The gates they unlocked. I stumbled through, not looking back, heart hammering, soaked with sweat and cold. Even now, weeks later, I can feel the cemetery closing in on me when the fog rolls over town. The whispers, the shapes, the impossible stillness of those figures. They remain waiting, and I know, deep down, that the locked gates were only the beginning. That night taught me something I can't explain. Some places, some nights, aren't meant to be left, and sometimes, no matter how far you drive, they follow. The highway stretched out before us, long and empty, disappearing into darkness that seemed thicker than a normal night. I patrolled this stretch countless times, and each trip left a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. Not the fear of accidents, not the usual hazards of drunk drivers or slick asphalt, but the emptiness itself. There was something about this road, especially at night, that made you feel exposed, like the world beyond the headlights didn't exist, or worse, that it was watching. My partner, Harris, rode shotgun, flipping through the radio channels, half listening to the static hum. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, headlights cutting through the dark, reflecting briefly off the broken guardrails and faded lane markings. The fog had rolled in earlier, hugging the asphalt and swallowing the beams of light. And even now, miles from town, it made the road seem narrower, tighter, almost suffocating. Do you ever get the feeling something's out there? Harris asked suddenly, voice low, like he didn't want to break the quiet completely. He didn't mean anything supernatural. He wasn't that kind of guy. But the way he said it made my stomach tighten. What do you mean? I replied, though I knew exactly what he meant. He shrugged, eyes scanning the edge of the fog. I don't know. Just sometimes on this road, I get that feeling like someone's following, like we're not really alone. I laughed softly, but it was hollow. We're alone, just the two of us and the asphalt. That's it. For a while, the radio crackled with routine calls. Minor accidents, stranded cars, barked warnings. Nothing that required us. But as we moved further down the highway, past the last cluster of trees before the bridge, I noticed a light, dim, flickering, just at the edge of the fog. At first, I thought it was a reflection from a distant sign or the glow of a house I couldn't see. But as we drove, it didn't change position. Harris noticed it too. "You see that?" "Yeah," I said. My voice was tight. "Probably someone's headlights in the fog. It's playing tricks." We watched, but the light didn't behave like normal headlights. It moved erratically, flashing just out of sync with our mirrors, disappearing and reappearing ahead of us. Behind us, always at the edges of our vision. My pulse quickened. I tried to rationalize fog, reflections, tired eyes, but the sensation of being followed, of being watched, pressed against my skin. I glanced at Harris. His jaw was tight, knuckles white against the dashboard. "I don't like this," he muttered. "Neither do I," I admitted, gripping the wheel harder. "But it's just a fog. That's all." The lights shifted again, closer this time, or maybe it was a fog changing. I couldn't tell. My mind raced. Empty roads, dark patches between the trees, silence beyond hum of the engine. Everything felt amplified. Even the crunch of tires on worn asphalt sounded like it could echo forever. We rounded a curve near the old gas station, the one that had burned down years ago. The light appeared there, hovering just beyond where the structure used to stand, unmoving. And then, for a moment, I thought I saw a figure, barely there, pale and human-shaped, standing in the glow. I blinked and it vanished. Harris noticed it too, his hand trembling slightly as he pointed. "Did you see that?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, I saw it." We drove on, headlights cutting through the fog, but the sensation didn't leave. Every now and then, I catch glimpses in the mirrors. Another flash of light, a shape flitting along the roadside, gone before I could focus. It wasn't consistent, wasn't logical, but it was relentless, always at the edges, never fully revealed. "Maybe it's just some old markers," Harris said, trying to rationalize, but even his voice betrayed his unease. "Yeah, maybe," I said, though my stomach twisted. I knew better. This stretch of highway was notorious, not just for accidents, but for stories. Drivers swerving off the road, strange lights, reports of people vanishing, or showing up hours later with no memory of what happened. I'd never believed in more outlandish tales, but tonight, something in the air felt heavy, tangible, like the highway itself was holding its breath. The lights followed us for miles, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, never steady, always shifting in ways that made no sense. My eyes strained against the fog, scanning every shadow, every roadside sign. I thought about calling it in, about letting dispatch know we were seeing something, but the words felt useless. How do you explain lights that move like they have intention? Shapes that vanish before you can fully process them. Harris broke the silence again. "You think anyone else sees this? Or just us?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I hope it's just us. But doesn't feel like it's random. Feels deliberate." The air grew colder, damp seeping into my jacket, the fog thickening, wrapping the highway in a near solid gray. Headlights cutting ahead, mirrors reflecting back shadows that weren't there. I tried to focus on the road, but my thoughts kept drifting to the stories I'd heard, the old reports and files at the station, drivers claiming headlights appeared out of nowhere, figures along the roadside, vanishing cars. I never thought I'd experience it myself. A curve appeared ahead, sharp and dark. I slowed, tires crunching on the worn asphalt. The lights flickered again, dancing at the periphery of my vision. And then, for a split second, I saw it clearly. A figure standing in the middle of the lane, motionless, pale against the fog. My stomach dropped, and I slammed on the brakes, the cruiser skidding slightly. The figure vanished. Gone. Harris gripped the dashboard. "Did you see that?" I nodded, voice tight. "Yeah, I saw it." We moved on, cautiously, every nerve stretched taut. The fog swallowed the road behind us, ahead of us, turning each headlight beam into a tunnel of uncertainty. The lights, whatever they were, followed, always just out of reach, teasing, deliberate. I could feel them pressing, not physically, but in a way that burrowed into the mind, into the instinct that tells you something isn't right. Minutes stretched into eternity. I kept glancing in the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see the figure again, half expecting something worse. Every shadow seemed alive, every flash of light and intention. I told myself it was the fog, the empty highway, the mind playing tricks, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The highway finally curved toward the bridge that led back into town. The fog thinned slightly, the lights fading with it, slipping away into the night. I exhaled, relief washing over me, but my chest still tight, pulse still hammering. Harris didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence was heavy, filled with the memory of lights and shadows, of shapes that moved with purpose, of that unbearable sensation of being followed. Even now, thinking back, I can feel it, the weight of emptiness pressing against the car, the fog swallowing the road, the lights lingering at the edges of vision. The highway isn't just asphalt and paint. It's something else. Patient, watching, waiting, and sometimes late at night, when the wind moves just right. I swear I can see those lights again, flickering at the edge of the fog, following, always following. Some nights, I dream of that highway, empty, endless, the fog curling around my boots, lights dancing in the distance. I wake up with a memory of it pressing into me, my pulse still racing. And I know, if I ever return, the highway will be there, waiting, patient, and I won't be alone. It had been a quiet stretch of highway, the kind where the darkness presses against the car, and the headlights carve out just enough space to see the road, but nothing else. Harris and I have been driving for hours, the kind of patrol that makes your mind wander, thinking about home, about dinner you haven't eaten yet, about the hum of tires on asphalt. But that night, something felt different. Not immediately, not at first. Just a weight in the air, subtle at first, like the world holding its breath. I saw them first, barely at the edge of the headlights, a figure standing by the side of the road, just beyond the last guardrail, pale against the blackness, small and still. My first thought was someone needing help. A stranded driver, maybe, or a hitchhiker foolish enough to stand out here this late. Harris, look, I muttered, voice low. His eyes followed mine, and he nodded, tensing. We slowed the cruiser, rolling the window down slightly, the hum of the engine loud in the night. Hey, I called, trying to sound casual, professional. Need a ride? The figure didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't wave, just stood there, shoulders hunched, head tilted slightly, watching us, or maybe not. I couldn't tell if they were looking at us, or through us. There was something off, something wrong about the way they were there. Too still, too precise. I eased the car closer. You okay? My voice had a slight edge now. Something in the pit of my stomach warned me. The hair on my arms prickled. The figure didn't respond. And then, like a trick of the light, or maybe my mind playing cruel games, they weren't there. One moment, pale and human-shaped at the edge of the fog and shadows. The next gone. Vanished. I blinked, scanning the roadside frantically. Nothing. Just the trees, the guardrail, the stretch of asphalt disappearing into darkness. Harris, did you see that? My voice shook. He nodded, face pale. Yeah, they were just there. I pressed the accelerator, moving a little ahead, then slowed again. The figure reappeared, just a few yards farther down the road, standing in the exact same posture, head tilted slightly, shoulders hunched, watching, waiting. My stomach twisted. I reached for the radio, thinking maybe I could call it in, get someone else on the stretch, but my hand froze. The words felt useless. Who will believe it? Lights, shadows, a person appearing and disappearing in the fog? It didn't make sense. And yet, I couldn't deny what I saw. Pull over, Harris muttered, his voice tight, trembling slightly. Maybe they need help. I shook my head. Something in me screamed not to stop. No, I said, something's off. But curiosity, that human flaw, gnawed at me. I slowed anyway, edging the cruiser to the shoulder, fog curling around us, swallowing the asphalt. Headlights cut through the mist in narrow beams, illuminating nothing beyond a few feet. And then I saw them again, pale, featureless almost, standing at the edge of the fog. Their feet didn't sink into gravel, just hovered slightly. I swallowed hard. My pulse hammered. Hello? I called again. Nothing. The fog whispered in the night, wrapping around the car, pressing against the glass, seeping into the cabin. Harris shifted nervously. "Maybe it's someone messing with us," he said. "Kids? Local pranksters." I didn't respond, because I knew better. I'd been on this highway for years. I knew the reports, the stories whispered in the station, drivers disappearing for hours, strange lights appearing along the roadside, figures vanishing as soon as you try to approach. I'd never thought I'd see it myself. And now I was. I stepped out of the cruiser. The cold air hit my face, wet and sharp. Fog clung to my jacket, curling around my sleeves. I called out again, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, do you need help?" No answer. Just the quiet hum of the tires on asphalt, the soft rustle of leaves, and then a flicker at the edge of my vision. I spun, flashlight in hand, beams slicing through the fog. There they were, not moving, not running, not approaching, just standing, exactly where they weren't moments before. I took a careful step forward. Another. Each one seemed to follow, or maybe the fog moved them, I couldn't tell. Every instinct in me screamed that this wasn't normal, that something about this entity, whatever it was, defied logic, and yet I couldn't stop. Harris shouted from the car, voice strained. "Allies, get back in, now!" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of the cruiser, to escape the weight pressing down on me, but something rooted me in place. The figure, it was even truly a figure, waited patiently, impossibly still, as if measuring my fear. My own heartbeat sounded deafening in my ears. And then, as I stepped closer, it vanished again, just gone. 1 second at the edge of the fog, the next, nothing but darkness and mist. My stomach dropped. I looked at Harris, panicked. He was gripping the dashboard, knuckles white, watching the road, watching the space where the figure had been. We should leave," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, finally letting myself step back, retreat to the cruiser. Doors locked, engine started. As we drove off, the highway seemed to stretch unnaturally, the fog thickening behind us. And yet, every now and then at the edge of the headlights, I thought I saw them again, just a shadow, a pale shape, watching, waiting, vanishing when I tried to get a better look. The rest of the patrol passed in uneasy silence. Every few miles, I glanced in the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see the figure standing on the shoulder, waiting for us to slow down, waiting to appear again. But the road was empty, too empty, and yet I knew better. I thought about the stories in the files, the missing drivers, the strange lights, the sudden vanishing of hitchhikers. I'd never believed all of it, not fully, and now, having seen it myself, I wasn't sure I could. That stretch of highway wasn't just dangerous because of accidents. It was dangerous because it was alive in a way I couldn't explain, patient, watching, waiting for anyone foolish enough to notice. Weeks later, I still think about that night. The fog, the figure, the impossible stillness. I dreamed sometimes of pulling over, of stepping into the mist, and seeing that pale shape just a few feet ahead, waiting, patient, impossible. And I know one thing for certain. No matter how many miles I put between me and that highway, some part of that figure follows, waiting, watching. And I can't shake the feeling that if I ever stop noticing, if I ever let my guard down, it will appear again. The highway is empty, yes, but it is never alone. The road was quiet that night, quieter than usual. Even the usual hum of distant traffic seemed muffled, swallowed by the thick darkness that settled over the highway. Harris and I had been patrolling for hours, tires humming over worn asphalt, headlights cutting through fog that had returned like a living thing. I thought I knew every curve, every shadowed turn, but something about that stretch felt different. It started with a flicker in the rear-view mirror. At first, I dismissed it, a trick of the light, my own fatigue making shadows dance where they shouldn't. But then I saw it again more distinctly, a shape, pale and shifting, just beyond the dim reflection of the empty road behind us. I froze for a moment, gripping the wheel tighter. "Harris, did you see that?" He glanced up, squinting at the mirror. "See what?" His voice was cautious, tinged with unease. I didn't answer right away, afraid to draw attention to it. afraid that speaking would make it real. The shape moved again, independent of anything I could understand. The road behind us was empty, headlights stretching into fog, nothing but black asphalt. Yet the rear-view mirror showed movement, shapes that bent and twisted unnaturally, figures that didn't belong to car, to the road, to reality. Pale, thin, humanoid, but wrong. Limbs bent in ways they shouldn't. Heads tilted too far. Shadows flickering across faces that weren't there. I swallowed hard. My pulse spiked. Harris, look. He followed my gaze, eyes widening. Holy, what the hell? I didn't have an answer. There was nothing behind us. Nothing that could have cast such reflections. And yet, there they were, writhing in the mirror like reflections of some other world, dancing at the edge of perception. Every time I glanced away, they seemed to grow closer. But when I focused, they twisted just beyond comprehension, as if reality itself was bending around them. My hands trembled on the wheel. I tried to rationalize. It's fatigue, mirrors, and fog play tricks. That's all. But even as I said it, I felt the lie. This wasn't my imagination. Not entirely. The shapes were deliberate, intelligent in a way that made my skin crawl. Harris reached for the radio, fumbling with the buttons. Maybe it's someone out there? Another vehicle? I shook my head, eyes locked on the rear view. No, there's nothing. There's nothing behind us. The shapes shifted again, and this time one seemed to lean closer, as if pressing its face against the glass of the mirror. I could see no features, just the suggestion of a face, the hollow indentation where eyes might be, and a tilt of the head that felt intentional. Watching, waiting. My breathing became shallow. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to check the road, to confirm that what I saw wasn't real. But fear anchored me in place. Something about these shapes made moving feel dangerous, as if acknowledging them too directly would draw their attention in ways I couldn't control. I glanced at Harris. His hands were gripping the dashboard, knuckles white, eyes darting between the mirror and the fog outside. Do they follow us?" he whispered. I couldn't answer. I didn't know. The rear view reflected nothing from reality, only the impossible, the unnatural. Figures twisting, elongating, breaking physics and logic, yet entirely present in that glassy world behind us. The fog thickened, curling around the headlights, around the car, muffling sound, warping perception. The shapes moved faster now, jerking, writhing, some stretching impossibly long, others compressing, faces forming and dissolving in moments. My chest tightened. It wasn't just fear, it was a pressure, a weight that pressed against my mind, tugging at the edges of memory, at the corners of reason. I tried to shake it off. "We need to keep moving," I said aloud, voice trembling. "Just keep driving. Don't stop." Harris nodded, swallowing hard. His hands shook on the steering wheel, eyes flicking constantly between the mirror and the road. Every now and then, I thought I caught glimpses of something in the passenger side mirror too, shapes, pale and twisting, vanishing the instant I focused. I realized then that the shapes weren't following physics. They weren't reflections of the world around us. They were something else entirely, independent, conscious, aware, and their awareness was tied to us, watching us, waiting. I could feel it pressing against my thoughts, a low hum in my mind that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of fatigue, a shared hallucination born from hours on the road. But the thought barely settled before a new horror struck. One shape seemed to smile. Not a full face, not a proper grin, but a suggestion of teeth, a stretch of darkness where lips should be. And it leaned closer, closer, pressing against the mirror like it wanted to be inside the car with us. I jerked my head toward Harris. His eyes were wide, almost frightened beyond words. We need to stop," he said, voice hoarse. "No," I said immediately. "If we stop, we're trapped. They'll get closer. Just keep going." The car sped along the asphalt, tires crunching, headlights cutting through the fog. But the rear view mirrored shapes that ignored our motion, shapes that slid forward with each passing second, independent of speed, independent of distance. I tried not to look, tried to fix my eyes on the road, but the peripheral flickers, the impossible movements, drew me back again and again. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Time felt twisted, stretched unnaturally by the fog, the darkness, and the shapes that writhed in the mirror. I could feel my own mind fraying, senses stretched thin, each flicker of movement a spike of terror that left me trembling. Then, for a moment, everything stopped. The shapes froze, suspended in the mirror like statues, heads tilted in unison, eyes, or the suggestion of eyes, fixed on me. Silence filled the cabin, heavy and oppressive. Even the fog outside seemed to pause, wrapping around the car in a cold embrace. And then, one by one, the shapes began to vanish, flickering, dissolving, fading back into impossibility until the rear view showed only the empty road stretching behind us. Headlights cut clean lines through fog, nothing else. I exhaled, chest heaving, trembling with relief. Harris stayed quiet, gripping the dashboard, eyes wide, shaking. Neither of us spoke for a long stretch, letting the highway swallow the silence. But even as we drove, a part of me knew they weren't gone. They never really were. Just beyond reception, beyond mirrors, waiting, patient, and impossible. Weeks later, I still catch glimpses in any reflective surface at night. The edge of a mirror, the sheen of a window, even the chrome of a stopped car. Shadows that don't obey the world, movements that shouldn't exist. I know now that the shapes in the rear view were never meant to be seen fully. They are not reflections. They are awareness, curiosity, something ancient and patient observing, bending reality in ways our minds can barely grasp. That night taught me something I cannot unlearn. The road is not empty. The mirrors do not reflect only the past or the physical, and some shapes, some presences, move independently of all reason, existing just to be watched, just to watch, just to remind you that the world is larger, stranger, and far more patient than we ever imagined. Even now, when I drive alone, I check the rear view. Not because I think I'll see them again, not because I want to, but because I know they're always there, just beyond the edge of perception, patient, impossible, and waiting. The hum of the engine and the tires on asphalt had become a kind of lullaby, steady and predictable. The fog had thinned slightly by the time we hit the next stretch of highway, but the shadows still lingered, curling around the guardrails and trees like smoke. I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst of the night was behind us. I was wrong. It started quietly, a faint hiss through the radio. Nothing unusual, just a static that comes and goes at night on these rural frequencies. I leaned closer, trying to clear it. Harris glanced at me, a faint furrow between his brows. "That's weird," he said. "It's never this bad out here." I shrugged, turning the dial slightly. Probably interference. Happens all the time. Then came the first scream. Not a normal call from dispatch, not a recorded alert or a transmission from another officer. It was a scream, high-pitched, ragged, echoing through the speakers in a way that made the car vibrate slightly. I jerked back in my seat, heart hammering. "Harris!" I breathed, voice tight. He didn't respond at first, frozen, staring at the radio with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Yeah, I heard it." The scream faded as quickly as it had come, replaced by the static again. But underneath the hiss, there were words. At first, they were barely audible, garbled, twisted, like the signal had been corrupted. Then I recognized them, and my stomach dropped. "My don't turn." The voice was distorted, pitch bending unnaturally, but I could hear the warning clearly. It was directed at us, not anyone else, just us. I slammed a hand on the radio, turning the volume down, but it was no use. The voice returned, weaving through the static, impossible to ignore. "Keep away, don't look." Harris's hand shook on the wheel. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. "I don't know," I admitted, voice tight. "It's coming through the radio, but no one else is talking. It's just us." The fog pressed closer, thickening at the edges of the headlights, and the air in the car seemed heavier, charged. The radio continued. Snatches of sound, screams, distorted words. Names. Our names. My name. Harris's. They hissed through the static like something breathing directly into the car. Voices layered and overlapping, urgent and terrified. I wanted to turn off the radio entirely. to kill the signal and escape the sound. But my instinct screamed that the voices weren't random. They were warnings, threats, instructions from something I couldn't see but could feel pressing against the edges of perception. "Don't stop," it whispered, barely audible, as though the words were bending in the air before reaching us. "Don't stop, don't look behind." I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. Every instinct in me wanted to flee, to turn around, to escape the creeping dread that filled the car. But running didn't feel like an option. This wasn't something you could outrun. Something was with us, in the air, in the static, in the fog. The words became clearer, forming sentences that didn't belong to any human pattern. "They are waiting. You are alone. Keep moving or they take." Harris swallowed audibly, eyes wide. "Our eyes, what the hell are they saying?" I don't know. I admitted. My voice sounded hollow even to me. "It's warnings. Or maybe threats. Something is out there." The radio shifted again, the scream returning, layered this time with multiple voices. I heard whispers overlapping. Pleas, curses, cries of pain, all tangled with our names. My chest tightened, breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The car felt smaller, the fog heavier, as though the world itself had contracted, forcing the presence closer. I tried to focus on the road, on the asphalt cutting ahead, but the sound clawed at my mind. Every scream, every word, every static-laced warning dug deeper, and I felt my resolve fraying. The shapes from earlier, the hitchhiker, the shadows, flickered in my mind, merging with the voices, as though the highway itself was alive, speaking to the radio. "Turn it off." Harris said finally, voice trembling. I hesitated. I wanted to. I needed to. But a part of me feared that silencing the radio would be worse. That it wasn't just a radio signal, but a connection, a line of sight, a channel we had accidentally opened. Whatever it was, it wanted us to listen, to obey, to understand. The static roared, louder now, the screams piercing through with brutal clarity. I could feel it pressing into my skull, digging into memory, twisting the corners of my mind. And through it all, the words continued, a terrifying litany only we could hear. "Do not stop. Do not turn. They are coming. They are near." I tried to cover my ears, tried to shut out, but it wasn't just sound. It was pressure, sensation, awareness, something else entirely, manipulating perception, warping the night around us. I glanced at Harris. His face was pale, his jaw tight, eyes flicking nervously between the fog road and the radio. "Our eyes, we need to get off this road. Now." I nodded, heart hammering, palms slick on the wheel. Every instinct screamed to obey, to follow the cryptic instructions of the voices, to move faster, to never look back. The fog twisted, curling around the headlights, and I swore the shapes we had seen before were there again, just at the edge of the beams, watching, waiting. The radio erupted again, a cacophony of screams and fragmented warnings, the word a mixture of pleading and command. I forced myself to breathe, counting silently, trying to maintain control. I had to. The fog and static pressed, relentless. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the fear paralyze me. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell, passed with the radio screaming, voices clawing at the edges of my sanity. Then, almost as suddenly as it had started, the static ceased. The screams cut off, leaving only silence. My pulse thundered in my ears. Harris exhaled, voice trembling. "Is it over?" he whispered. I shook my head slowly, though relief coursed through me. "I don't think it's over," I said. "It's just quiet for now, but it's still there." Even as we drove on, the memory of the voices lingered, a shadow pressing against the back of my mind. I could still hear whispers when the car was silent, faint and distorted, as if the radio had left a mark, a presence embedded in the night. And I knew deep down that the next time the fog thickened or the highway stretched empty before us, the static would return, and with it, the screams, the warnings, and the feeling that something unseen was always listening. The patrol ended eventually, but the echo of that night never left me. At home, I double-checked every device, every signal, every interference, and found nothing. No explanation, no interference, no recording. Just a knowledge that we had heard something. Something alive, something patient and aware, speaking directly to us through the static of a lonely highway. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear it. Faintly, if I close my eyes and focus on the hum of silence. Just a whisper, calling my name, warning me, reminding me. The highway never forgets. The fog never forgets. And the radio listens. I remember the moment I realized something was terribly wrong. It started as a simple thing. A turnoff we'd passed countless times. The small dirt road that led to an old, abandoned gas station. We knew it well. I'd made that patrol hundreds of times. But that night, it wasn't there. Harris slowed the cruiser, eyes scanning the fog-draped highway. Our eyes, did we miss it? He asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice. I shook my head, gripping the wheel. No, it should be right here. I peered into the fog, headlights cutting narrow slices through the darkness. But all I saw was asphalt stretching endlessly, curving in familiar ways yet somehow alien. The turnoff was gone. Just black road ahead, no sign of the dirt path, no curb, no gap in the guardrail. Nothing. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe the road was closed. I muttered, construction, maintenance, something. But even as I said it, the thought sounded hollow. This stretch of highway had been deserted for months. No construction crews ever came out here at night. No signs, no barriers, nothing. And yet the turnoff had vanished. Completely. Harris's hand trembled as he adjusted the wheel, following the curve of the road instinctively. This doesn't make sense, he said. We've been here 100 times. I swallowed hard. I know. We drove past the spot where the turnoff should have been. I kept glancing at the map on my phone, but it didn't help. The dirt road was marked clearly there, but the map didn't line up with reality. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of asphalt swallowed by fog. No exit, no turning point, nothing but curves that looped back on themselves. I tried not to panic, but the tightness in my chest was growing. Harris, try going back. Turn around. Let's see if we can find it from the other side. He nodded, hands gripping the wheel tighter. Okay, we'll try that. We turned the cruiser around, retracing our path, but the highway refused to cooperate. Every familiar landmark felt slightly wrong. Trees were in places they shouldn't be. Guardrails appeared where there had been none. The curves of the asphalt shifted subtly, just enough to make the world feel untrustworthy. And still, the turnoff did not appear. I checked the map again. My finger traced the route over and over. It should have been right here, a simple dirt path veering off the highway. But reality refused to match the digital certainty in my hand. The turnoff, a road I knew as well as my own home, had vanished entirely. I felt the panic creeping into the edges of my mind, the same heavy dread I had felt on the other stretches of highway, but now magnified, personal. We were trapped, circling in a loop of asphalt that should have offered an exit, but provided none. Each turn brought us back to the same point, or at least a point that looked eerily similar. Harris's voice broke the silence, shaky. Do you think it's messing with us? Like before? I didn't answer right away. The thought lingered in the back of my mind. The radio, the fog, the vanishing figures, the rear view shapes. Could the highway itself be conscious, manipulating the world around us? It seemed impossible, but the evidence was all around. Our sense of direction failed. Maps were lies. Landmarks shifted. Reality was bending. I tried to focus on the road, but every instinct screamed that it was a trap. The fog pressed closer with each passing mile, hugging the headlights, curling around the car. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist at the edge of vision, dark shapes that vanished when we looked directly. And still no turnoff. We kept driving, circling, repeating paths that should have been distinct. Every mile felt heavier than the last. The car a cage moving through a world that no longer obeyed logic. I could feel my mind straining, the edges of sanity fraying as familiarity turned into terror. The highway wasn't just unfamiliar. It was hostile, deliberately so. At one point, I tried to stop, to take a breath, to reset. But as soon as I slowed the cruiser, the fog thickened, pressing against the windshield, clutching at the edges of the headlights. It was as if the road itself had noticed, as if slowing gave an opportunity to tighten its grip. I slammed the accelerator, heart hammering, and we surged forward, the fog rippling around us. Harris muttered under his breath, voice trembling. It's like it's alive, watching. I didn't answer, because I knew he was right. Each loop, each impossible repetition of the landscape, the missing turnoff, the way the fog shifted and reshaped around us, it wasn't natural. It was deliberate. The highway was aware, and it was not friendly. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the loops overlapping in my mind, every mile repeated, yet subtly different, so that I couldn't tell if we were moving forward or merely spinning in place. The vanishing turnoff was no longer just a road. It was a symbol of the highway's refusal to let us leave, a warning that our presence had been noticed, and something was testing us. I tried to recall other patrols, other nights, other stretches of road. Nothing compared to this. The emptiness was absolute, yet it felt full of intent. The air vibrating with a quiet malice that I could not explain. The asphalt wound beneath us like a ribbon stretching forever, carrying us in circles, mocking our knowledge, mocking our certainty. Harris's breathing grew louder, uneven, almost hyperventilating. Our eyes, what if we're not supposed to get out? I couldn't answer. I didn't want to say it aloud, because speaking it made it real, but a cold certainty settled in my chest. We were trapped, not by walls, not by locks, but by something that bent reality, something that reshaped the world around us to keep us here, to make us question every sense, every memory, every instinct. I tried to focus on something tangible, the headlights cutting through the fog, the feel of the wheel beneath my hands, the hum of the engine, anything to anchor myself. But even those were deceptive. Shadows moved just beyond clarity, shapes that shouldn't exist in our world, silhouettes bending in ways that should have been impossible. And then I saw it, a flicker at the corner of my eye, the turnoff, just a brief glimpse during gravel, and the faint outline of the gas station beyond. My heart leapt, relief surged. There! I shouted, pointing, gripping the wheel tighter. But when I swerved, when we tried to follow it, it was gone, vanished completely. The fog swallowed it. The asphalt stretched, the highway looped, and we were back in the same endless circle. I felt a wave of panic crash over me, the culmination of hours of terror, uncertainty, and the creeping awareness that nothing in this stretch of road could be trusted. The vanishing turnoff was no longer a single road. It was a statement, a lesson, a proof of something beyond comprehension. That highway was alive, and we were prey. We drove on, hopeless, exhausted, hearts pounding, the map useless, the familiar landmarks false. Every loop reinforced the same terrifying realization. Escape was not guaranteed. Familiarity was a lie. Reality was fluid here, bending around us, and the turnoff, the road I had known since my first patrol, was gone. Gone as if it had never existed. Hours, or maybe it was minutes, I couldn't tell, passed like this, a suffocating, never-ending cycle. The fog remained, the loops persisted, and the highway mocked us with its empty stretches, with its disappearing exits. We were caught in a world that had once been mundane, familiar, safe. Now, it was an ever-shifting labyrinth with no exit, a highway that remembered us and refused to let us go. I don't know how long we drove. I don't know how many loops, how many repetitions of the same asphalt stretching endlessly into the fog. But I remember the weight of it, the knowledge that the turnoff, the one road that should have saved us, was gone, erased, inaccessible. And I knew then that the highway wasn't just a road. It was aware. It was patient. It was waiting for us to falter. And I knew deep down that some part of us would. The mill had been abandoned for decades, its timbers rotting, windows shattered, roofs sagging in places where the rain had worn it away. I had driven past it countless times on day patrols, always thinking it was just another piece of the past left crumble into the river. But at night, in the fog, in the stillness of late hours, it felt different, alive, almost. Locals said things move at night, but I had never taken that seriously until I got the call. The radio had been quiet for hours. A report of noises coming from the old mill. A neighbor worried about shadows moving behind broken windows. Nothing concrete, just that sense of unease that sometimes comes with rural life. I shrugged off the apprehension as I drove out, headlights cutting through the misty darkness. The road twisted between trees and low hills, and the fog thickened with each turn. I could feel the night pressing against the car, cold and damp. I parked near the overgrown path leading up to the mill. The grass had grown tall, brushing against the tires as I stepped out. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and decay, mixed with a faint chemical tang of old machinery left to rust. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked toward the building, flashlights sweeping across the mill's exterior. The boards were splintered, windows gaping like black eyes staring back at me. A faint wind whispered through the broken slats, carrying a sound I couldn't place at first. A creak, a sigh, a movement that wasn't entirely the wind. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and eased closer. I stepped onto the porch, and the boards groaned under my weight. Something shifted inside, a subtle movement that made me freeze mid-step. My mind tried to rationalize it. A rat, the wind, a loose shutter. But deep down, I knew it wasn't so simple. The shadows inside the mill didn't behave like shadows. They flickered, twisted, almost like they had substance, like they could reach out if given a chance. I spoke aloud, voice unnaturally loud in the silence. "Hello? Anyone here?" My words seemed swallowed by the building itself. The shadows didn't answer. They just shifted. I moved cautiously inside, flashlight beam cutting through dust and decay. Broken machinery leaned at impossible angles, rusted gears glinting in the light. The floor was littered with old tools and wooden planks, some cracked, some missing entirely. The air smelled of rotten oil and something else I couldn't name, something faintly metallic and almost organic. A sound made me jump, a low creak, like a step from somewhere above. I froze, listening. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to call out again, the beam of the flashlight caught something moving upstairs. A shadow, too large and too deliberate to be a trick of the light, slipped past a broken doorway and disappeared. My heart pounded in my chest. Rational thought argued with instinct. There's no one here. It's an abandoned mill. You're alone. But every nerve screamed the opposite. Every hair on my neck stood on end. I stepped forward, each movement slow, deliberate, trying not to startle whatever I couldn't see. I reached the foot of the stairs, the wood creaking ominously under my weight. The shadows above seemed to cling to the ceiling, shifting, stretching. I swore I saw shapes, figures, almost human, lingering at the edge of vision before they melted back into darkness. My breath came fast, shallow. I had convinced myself I wasn't imagining it. Focus, flashlight, every step counted. As I ascended the stairs, I noticed the walls were scratched, deep gouges in the wood, like something had clawed at them over years. Some were fresh, the wood still splintered, sharp. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath hanging in faint clouds. At the top, the floorboard creaked alarmingly under my weight. I froze, straining to listen. The faintest whisper seemed to echo from the far corner of the mill, a sound too soft to be fully audible, like a sigh carried through the air. I couldn't make out words, but the cadence was deliberate, measured, unnerving. I felt, rather than saw, movement around me, shadows pooling in corners, shifting shapes in the beams of the flashlight, always just beyond clarity. I forced myself to move forward, stepping carefully across the room. Old machinery lay abandoned, gears and cogs like skeletal remains of industry. The whispers grew slightly louder, almost forming syllables I couldn't comprehend, pressing against my mind. I shook my head, trying to clear the sound. It's the wind, just the wind. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not mine, not echoing, independent, slow, measured, somewhere behind a row of broken crates. I froze, holding my breath. The sound stopped, and the shadows seemed to pulse, reacting, waiting. Harris would have said something if he were here. I muttered to myself, tried to inject rationality, but I was alone, absolutely alone. And yet the presence was undeniable. The sense of being observed, of being followed, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. I edged closer to the far corner, flashlight sweeping every shadow, every broken beam. Nothing, yet the feeling remained, watching, patient, and then, just as my pulse began to slow, the floor beneath me shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me stumble slightly. My heart leapt. Something had moved. Something had breathed. Something had acknowledged me. I gripped the railing, trying to steady myself, shining the flashlight into the darkest corner. The beam caught nothing, just the empty, dilapidated space. Dust motes drifting in the air, but the shadows, they seemed to linger, unnatural in their stillness, like they were waiting for me to look away. A low creak sounded again, closer this time, almost beneath the floorboards. I jumped, scanning the ground. No movement, yet the air was alive with it. The whispers grew louder, urgent now, brushing the edges of comprehension. I shook my head, trying to clear it. You're alone. It's just the mill settling, just the wind. Then I saw it, a figure, standing just at the edge of the light. Not entirely solid, more like a shadow with form, humanoid but wrong. Limbs stretched at unnatural angles, head cocked in a way no human could manage. It didn't move toward me, didn't speak, didn't even blink, but the awareness, the intent behind it was undeniable. It was conscious of me, studying, patient, indifferent yet focused. I couldn't move, breath caught, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to flee, to escape, but something rooted me in place. The figure remained silent, and the whispers wrapped around me, threading into my thoughts. My name floated there, just a fragment teasing, echoing in my mind. I stumbled backward, gripping the railing for support. The figure didn't vanish, didn't move. Yet when I turned my flashlight elsewhere, it seemed closer, always at the edge of vision. The air grew colder still, biting at my skin, and I could hear faint creaks of shifting boards, the sound of something moving just beyond perception. I finally turned and fled, stumbling down the stairs, breath ragged, hand shaking. Outside, the fog had thickened, curling around the mill like a living thing. The night was silent, save for the distant rush of the river. I didn't look back, but the sense of being observed lingered, heavy, oppressive. Even as I drove away, headlights cutting through fog, the image of the figure burned in my mind. Not solid, not fully there, but undeniably present. And the whispers, faint, almost lost in the static of memory. But I could still hear them, threading through the night, patient, waiting, impossible to forget. The locals were right. Things moved at night in that mill. Not machinery, not rats, something else. Something older, patient, aware. And for the first time, I realized that the line between reality and what lurked in the darkness was thinner than I ever wanted to believe. Even now, I think of that night, of the figure at the edge of the light, of the whispers threading through the air. I don't know if it was waiting for me, or if I had stumbled into its world by mistake. All I know is that the mill is alive in ways that defy reason, and some things, some shadows, linger far longer than the night allows. And I know I'll never forget. The stairs were worse than I remembered, narrow, uneven, and groaning under every careful step. Each plank protested beneath my weight, a symphony of creaks that seemed impossibly loud in the heavy silence of the mill. I gripped the railing, though I wasn't sure it was secure, and slowly ascended, flashlight beam cutting through the thick darkness. Every shadow seemed to twist unnaturally, elongating and curling in the corners of the room, as if the walls themselves were watching. I told myself I was alone. I repeated it over and over, like a mantra, as though saying it aloud could convince the fog of dread that filled the old building. You're alone. It's just an old mill. Nothing moves here. Nothing. But even as I spoke the words, the thought felt hollow. The air was too heavy, too tense, as though some presence pressed against the edges of my perception. Halfway up the stairs, I froze. A faint sound floated down from above. A single step, deliberate, echoing in the hollow space of the upper floor. I held my breath, straining to listen. The sound repeated. Another step, then another, too slow to be my own, too measured to be random settling of wood. My pulse quickened. I'm imagining it. I whispered, shaking my head. It has to be. But the stairs beneath me groaned again in rhythm with the steps above, and the hair on my arms rose. Something was up there. Something moving. Not a rat, not a bird, not the wind. It felt human, but wrong. The cadence was deliberate, impossible to ignore. I forced myself to continue, one foot in front of the other, steady, careful, flashlight scanning the stairwell. The steps above continued, never faster, never slower, always measured. I couldn't see anything yet, just the shadows between broken floorboards and the dim outline of the landing above. I reached the top of the stairs and paused at the threshold. The room was dark, the corners swallowed by shadow. The air smelled of dust, mildew, and something metallic, faintly coppery, like old blood. My flashlight beam swept slowly across the floor, catching the skeletal remains of machinery, broken crates, and scattered debris. Nothing moved, yet the sound continued. Footsteps, echoing softly. Circling somewhere just out of reach, I took a tentative step forward. The floorboards creaked under me, and for a moment, the footsteps above paused. My breath caught. Then they began again, this time a few beats behind my own movement, as if following, matching, mocking. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. It's an old building. Sounds carry. You're imagining it. But even as I repeated it, the sensation of being watched pressed down on me. I felt in the small of my back, in the tiny hairs standing on end across my arms. In the tightening in my chest, a soft thump made me jump. I swung the flashlight toward the sound, and for a split second, I thought I saw a figure. Tall, thin, its shape blurring at the edges as though made of smoke. Then it was gone, melting into the darkness, leaving only the echo of my racing heartbeat and the footsteps that continued, patient, deliberate. I moved deeper into the upper room, trying to keep my steps quiet. The floorboards groaned under my weight, betraying every movement. The footsteps above shifted slightly, echoing, but never moving closer or farther away. They were like a heartbeat, a metronome marking time in a building that shouldn't have had anyone else in it. The room itself felt alive. Shadows pulled in the corners, stretching along the walls in impossible angles. Broken machinery leaned like skeletal limbs, and the air seemed thick, pressing against my lungs, heavy with expectation. I could feel the weight of something unseen, circling, observing, waiting. I stopped near a row of crates, flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. The footsteps grew louder, more insistent, but still just beyond sight. My mind raced. Why here? Why now? It's empty. There's nothing up here. And yet the sound persisted, echoing in the beams of light, around the corners, behind walls that shouldn't have transmitted it so clearly. I tried calling out, voice low, controlled. Hello? Is someone there? My words were swallowed by the darkness. No answer. Only the echo of the footsteps, as if the building itself had absorbed my voice. Another step, closer this time, and I caught a glimpse again, shadow at the edge of the flashlight. Humanoid in shape but impossible in form. Limbs too long, head cocked at an unnatural angle. It didn't move toward me, didn't speak, didn't even blink, but the awareness, the consciousness behind it, pressed against my mind, and I could feel a strange pull, a warning, a demand to leave. I turned, backing toward the stairs, eyes scanning constantly. The steps didn't stop. They followed, above me, circling, marking time. My chest tightened, breath shallow, every muscle coiled with tension. The upper floor was a trap, a stage set to confuse, disorient, and terrify. And the footsteps, they were deliberate in a way that made me certain I wasn't alone. I felt for my radio, fumbling in my pocket, hoping for a reassuring voice from dispatch. Static answered, nothing more. My mind raced, imagining every worst-case scenario. What if someone's up here? What if it's not human? The thought made my stomach churn, but the evidence of movement, the deliberate steps, the heavy sense of being observed, refused to be denied. The shadows seemed to shift with every breath, stretching toward me in impossible angles, and I felt my control slipping. I forced myself to focus on the sound of footsteps, try to determine their source, their location, but the room's geometry seemed wrong, the space distorted. Every step echoed from nowhere, from everywhere, impossible to track. I backed up further, stumbling slightly, heart hammering. The floorboards groaned beneath me, and the footsteps paused briefly, perfectly timed with my movement, then resumed. The synchronization was too precise to be coincidence, too deliberate. A cold realization hit me. Whatever was up here, it wasn't just moving. It was aware, measuring, observing, testing, and it knew I could hear it, that I could feel it, that I could see fragments of it in the shadows. My pulse throbbed in my ears as dread seeped into every corner of my consciousness. I forced myself to keep moving toward the stairs. Every step was agony. Every creak would amplify the sound of footsteps above. They mirrored me, echoed me, teased me, patient and unyielding. The beam of my flashlight trembled in my grip, revealing only fragments of the upper room. Fragments that hinted at motion just beyond understanding. Near the top of the staircase, I paused, listening, trying to rationalize. The footsteps above me stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I could hear only my own breathing, ragged and uneven, and the faint hum of the old mill settling. Then, abruptly, the steps resumed, but in a rhythm that didn't match mine. They were faster now, light but deliberate, scurrying across floorboards that should have creaked differently. Panic clawed at my mind. I spun the flashlight toward the sound, but the beam only caught dust and shadows. No shape, no figure, nothing. Yet I knew something moved there, something unseen, close and patient, feeding on a fear in my chest. I swallowed hard and whispered to myself, trying to force calm. It's just the building. It's just echoes, just your imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The deliberate steps, the shifting shadows, the impossible angles, they were proof of something alive, aware and waiting. Every instinct screamed to leave. Slowly, deliberately, I edged backward down the stairs, keeping my eyes on the upper floor. The steps above followed, echoing my movement, a reminder that the presence was patient, that it could wait, that it could observe without ever being seen. I finally reached the landing and glanced back up one last time. The shadows were still there, pooling at the edges, shapes stretching just beyond comprehension. The footsteps had stopped, or maybe they had just merged with the darkness, but I could feel the lingering awareness, a weight pressing against my mind. Outside, the fog had thickened, curling around the mill like smoke. I bolted down the last few steps, almost tripping, and burst into the open air, lungs burning, heart hammering. The night was silent now, except for the distant rush of the river and the hum of my own racing pulse. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The footsteps, the shadows, the present upstairs, they were still there, watching, waiting. And I knew, even as I drove away, that the mill remembered me, that it had marked me, that whatever moved above, whatever followed, would linger long after I left. Even now, I can hear when I close my eyes the soft, measured echo of footsteps upstairs, patient, deliberate, and impossibly alive. And I know that night will stay with me forever. I didn't know what drew me back to that upper room of the mill. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe that stubborn part of me that refuses to accept that some things are beyond explanation. I told myself I was going to just look, take a few notes, and leave. But as soon as I raised a flashlight, something inside me whispered that the night wasn't done with me yet. The windows up their cracked, dirt-streaked, and nearly opaque with grime, but in the faint beam of the flashlight, something shimmered. At first, I thought it was just a reflection of my own face, pale, tight with tension, eyes wide. But then it changed. Shapes moved within the glass. Figures that weren't in the room with me. I froze, holding the flashlight so tightly my knuckles ached. There was a woman, standing just behind where I had been seconds ago. She wore a long dress, dark and tattered, hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She didn't speak, didn't move, yet I could feel her presence pressing to the glass, aware of me, aware of my fear. My breath caught. I blinked, and she was gone, replaced by a man sitting on the stairs, my stairs. But he wasn't me. He was older, his face lined with worry, eyes darting nervously toward the corners of the room that I knew contained nothing. Yet, when I glanced around, there was no one, just empty, silent dust. I stumbled back, heart hammering, flashlight shaking as I tried to rationalize. It's a trick of the glass. Reflections, distorted light, old windows do strange things. But that explanation didn't fit. These images weren't random. They were deliberate, composed, like moments captured from another life entirely. Then the whispers began again, faint at first, threading through the shadows. Soft voices, syllables I couldn't fully make out, but enough to know they were deliberate, calling, coaxing. The air around me seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest, against my ears. I could hear my own heartbeat, but it wasn't enough to drown out the murmurs, the soft shuffle of footsteps that had started again, but this time coming from behind the windows themselves. I approached one of the larger panes, tilting my flashlight to catch more of the reflection. The glass seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by wind. And then I saw it. A small boy, laughing, standing on the floor that should have been empty. His eyes were bright, and he smiled directly at me. I froze. My mind screamed at me not to move, not to breathe too loudly, as if the sound might shatter the fragile reality holding him there. He waved, and then the image flickered, replaced by a scene I hadn't seen before. My own patrol car, lights flash in the fog, the radio wailing out a static scream that I hadn't yet heard. Yet somehow I knew it was coming. My stomach dropped. The glass reflected not what was, but what would be, or what could have been. Events I hadn't experienced yet, or perhaps memories I wasn't supposed to have. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the broken floorboards. The shadows around me seemed to pulse, stretching along the walls and ceiling. Each reflection in the window was a fragment of something impossible. Faces, moments, whispers of lives that never intersected with mine, and yet the weight of recognition pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I raised the flashlight higher, scanning the remaining panes. A man stood outside the mill, motionless, staring up at me. He raised his hand, just once, in acknowledgement. The reflection shifted before I could respond. He vanished, replaced by a night I didn't remember living, a fire, a scream, a shadow moving the periphery of my vision. I stumbled to the wall, pressing my hand against it to steady myself, every muscle coiled with fear. The reflections seemed to multiply, filling the windows, layering over one another. I could see people walking through rooms that didn't exist, events that hadn't happened, conversations I couldn't hear but somehow felt. The air vibrated with the weight of all these impossible moments, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. My pulse thundered in my ears. I thought I understood fear. I had walked into abandoned buildings, faced storms, called in emergencies, dealt with accidents that left people broken. But this was a different kind of terror. It wasn't the threat of injury or blood or fire. It was a knowledge that reality itself could bend, to reflect things that never were, and that I was powerless to stop it. The whispers grew louder, rising in urgency, overlapping, forming fragments of words I almost understood. Leave, now, don't look, stay. My stomach twisted, and a cold sweat ran down my back. Every instinct screamed to flee, but my feet felt rooted. The reflections demanded my attention, compelling me, taunting me, offering a view into something I wasn't meant to see. I saw a figure I thought I recognized, my own reflection, but distorted, older, weary, with eyes hollowed by things I had not yet endured. The reflection blinked, but my real eyes didn't. The flashlight flickered, throwing the room into darkness for a brief, shuddering moment. And when the beam returned, the glass was empty. The weight in the air remained, pressing, patient, aware. I felt a movement behind me. Soft, deliberate, echoing footsteps. My body stiffened, every hair on my arm standing. I didn't need to turn. The presence was undeniable, just beyond perception, circling, patient. The shadows in the room shifted again, stretching toward the glass, as if trying to reclaim the images I had glimpsed. I tried to speak, my voice trembling. I have to go. The words sounded small, meaningless against the oppressive awareness that filled the room. The whisper softened, almost approving, almost satisfied, and then ceased. The reflections vanished, leaving only my own pale face staring back at me from the grimed street glass. The mill fell silent, so utterly silent that every sound of my own movement seemed deafening. Even the old timbers, the settling that had once creaked beneath my weight, held their breath. The oppressive weight remained, lingering in the corners, in the spaces where the shadows pooled. I knew that the reflections weren't gone. They were waiting, somewhere just beyond the edge of perception, patient, deliberate. I backed toward the stairs, flashlight sweeping every shadow, every corner, every possible hiding place. The air felt lighter now, though still cold, still pressing. I stumbled down the stairs, nearly tripping on broken planks, ears straining for any sound, any movement. Silence followed, but I knew it was fragile, temporary, waiting. Outside, the fog had thickened, curling around the mill in tendrils that seemed almost alive. The night was quiet, save for the distant rush of the river. I didn't look back at the building, but I could feel it watching, waiting. I knew the reflections, the impossible scenes, the whispers, would linger in my memory, insistent, impossible to forget. Even as I drove away, the windows of the mill haunted me, shadows shifting at the edges of vision, faces I had never known, events that had never occurred, all lingering in the corner of my mind. The weight of awareness pressed in, heavy and unyielding, a reminder that some places retain memory, some places retain presence. And I knew that night, the reflections, the whispers, the impossible glimpses into other lives and other realities, they weren't just illusions, they were real, real enough to leave me trembling, real enough to make me doubt everything I thought I understood about the world. Even now, when the wind rattles the windows at home, or when a shadow passes too slowly across a wall, I think of that night, of the mill of the glass, of faces that should not exist. And I know that the reflections are still there, waiting for the next person brave or foolish enough to look. It was past midnight when I pulled into the parking lot of Redwood Pines Motel, the neon sign flickering like it had been struggling for years just to stay alive. The rain had tapered off, leaving slick puddles that mirrored the faint glow of the streetlights. I leaned back in my seat for a moment, listening to the steady hum of the engine, trying to steady my nerves. Nights like this always felt heavier, as though the darkness carried its own weight, pressing down on everything it touched. Dispatch had called in the report. Room 6, strange noises, complaints from the manager, the kind of call that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. It wasn't unusual to get weird calls in a town this quiet, but the tone in the manager's voice had been different. Nervous, hesitant, almost as if saying the words aloud might make it all worse. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, stepping out into the wet night. The smell of damp asphalt and pine filled my senses. My boots made soft splashes in the shallow puddles as I walked toward the small office where the manager was waiting, pale under the flickering fluorescent light. "Evening, Sheriff," he said, voice low. I don't know what to make of it. It's just noises." His hands trembled slightly as he gestured toward the hall. "Room 6. Guest checked out earlier. Nothing should be there, but the sounds, they keep coming. Footsteps, whispers. I swear I even heard someone crying." I nodded, forcing a calm I didn't entirely feel. "I'll check it out. You stay here, all right? Don't go near the room." He swallowed, nodded, and watched me walk toward the hallway, the fluorescent lights fading behind me. The corridor smelled of old carpet, damp wood, and stale air. Each step echoed unnaturally, bouncing off walls that had seen too many years. I passed a series of empty doors, each identical, each closed, each holding secrets I couldn't yet imagine. Room 6 was at the far end, the door chipped and faded, the number barely legible. I stopped outside listening. The air was heavy, almost vibrating with anticipation. Then I heard it, a soft thump, almost imperceptible, followed by a low moan. My stomach twisted. The rational part of my brain argued it was the building settling, or perhaps a stray animal trapped somewhere. But another part, that part that knows when something isn't right, told me otherwise. I raised my flashlight and knocked lightly on the door. "Sheriff, just checking. Anyone in there?" No response. Silence pressed against the hallway. I tried the knob. Locked. I radioed dispatch, voice low. "Unit 12 to dispatch. I'm at room 6. Doors locked. No one responding." Static crackled in reply. "Copy, Unit 12. Proceed with caution." I took a deep breath and knocked harder, each rap echoing through the hall. Then faintly, I heard it again, the softest scrape of movement on the floor inside. My pulse quickened. "Room 6, this is law enforcement. Open up." Nothing. I leaned closer, flashlight beam sweeping the door and floor. The air was cooler here, damp, almost suffocating. I pressed my ear to the wood. Another sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling, moving where no one should be able to walk. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, hands shaking slightly, trying to force reason into the chaos in my mind. It's empty. It has to be empty. Old pipes, rats, settling noises. But I knew, deep down, none of those explanations fit the deliberate pattern of what I was hearing. I moved to the side of the door, trying the small window in the top panel. The glass was grimy, streaked with age. I pressed my face close, trying to see inside. The room was dark, shadows pooling in corners, furniture untouched, but for a brief instant, I thought I saw movement. Something crossing the floor just out of the light's reach. I staggered slightly, heart hammering. I could feel the weight of the night pressing in, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint, impossible sounds from behind the door. I whispered to myself, trying to calm the panic rising in my chest. You've dealt with worse. Empty buildings, drunk drifters, domestic disputes. This is just another call. But the words sounded hollow, even in my own ears. The footsteps came again, closer this time, circling, dragging, soft but distinct. I could almost map their path, though the room was empty. Something or someone was in there, watching, waiting. I drew my flashlight back and tried the radio again, voice tight. Dispatch! I need backup at room 6. There's something in here. Static answered. Then the faint voice of the manager. I told you something wasn't right. His voice broke off mid-sentence, replaced by a soft thump from inside the room. I gritted my teeth and pulled out my keys, ready to unlock the door forcibly. My training told me to proceed cautiously, to expect the unexpected. But my gut screamed to run, to get out while I could. Every instinct was on high alert. Finally, I unlocked the door, flashlight raised. The hinges creaked as it swung inward. The room was empty, just a bed, a dresser, and the faint lingering smell of mildew and old smoke. I stepped inside, careful, sweeping the beam across every corner. Nothing, no one, no footprints, just silence. Then I froze. The window opposite the door rattled slightly, though there was no wind. A soft whisper brushed against my ears, almost as if the room itself spoke. I couldn't make out words, only tones, rising and falling like a slow chant. My pulse throbbed painfully. I backed toward the door, every nerve on edge. The whispers continued, wrapping around me, pressing against my mind. I called out again, voice shaking. Room 6. Anyone there? Nothing. I stepped fully into the center of the room, flashlight sweeping slowly. The air felt heavier now, thicker, almost alive. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners, flickering with movement that shouldn't exist. I could feel eyes on me, unseen and cold. My stomach churned. Suddenly, a soft scrape from behind the bed made me jump. The flashlight flicked, catching the edge of something, barely there, like mistaking shape. I swung the beam fully, but it vanished. My heart raced, breaths coming shallow. I tried to convince myself it was imagination playing tricks, tired mind interpreting shadows. But deep down, I knew better. This room, this building, carried something with it. Something patient, deliberate, waiting for anyone to notice. I radioed dispatch again, voice low, almost trembling. Unit 12. Room 6 is empty, but there's presence. I don't know how else to put it. Static answered, then quiet. I waited, ears straining. The room seemed to sigh. A breath I couldn't place, settling into the corners and walls. I backed out carefully, flashlight sweeping, door closing behind me. The moment I stepped into the hallway, the whispers stopped. Silence swallowed everything. Outside, the neon flickered lazily, and the rain had stopped entirely. I pressed a button on the radio again, reporting that the room was clear. The manager was pale, watching, his hands fidgeting. I didn't try to explain what I had felt. Words would fail. There were no rational explanations, and even suggesting something supernatural would only draw disbelief. I left the room, noting the time and the noises in my report, though I knew they would be dismissed as imagination or stress. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of something lingering just beyond perception, something that existed only when no one was looking directly, patient, and deliberate. That night, the motel was quiet again. The hum of the neon sign and the distant highway were the only sounds. But I knew the room held more than I could see, more than I could touch. Room 6 waited, patient, silent, its presence a reminder that some places don't forget, don't stay empty, and don't let go. Even now, I can hear the faintest whisper in my memory, the soft scrape of movement behind walls, reminding me that whatever was there, whatever watched me that night, is still waiting. The next time I returned to room 6, the feeling of unease had settled into my bones like a weight I couldn't shake. Even before I stepped into the hallway of the motel, I felt it, an almost magnetic pull, drawing me toward the door that had haunted my thoughts since the first night. The rain had stopped for now, leaving the air damp and cold, clinging to my jacket and chilling my fingers as I gripped the flashlight. The manager had insisted I be careful. He didn't have to explain why. I already knew. The way he avoided looking at that particular door told me everything I needed to know. Every time I passed it, every time I glanced at the peeling paint and crooked number, it felt alive, watching, waiting. I stepped down the hallway slowly, boots making soft echoes that bounced off the walls. Room 6 loomed at the end, ordinary and yet impossibly wrong. I had been here before, I knew the space, but now every detail seemed sharper, more threatening. The door itself seemed thicker, with swelling slightly as though it had absorbed the tension of the air around it. I reached out and tried the knob. Locked. Of course it was locked. But this time it wasn't just a simple latch or a stuck bolt. No! This felt different, like the door was resisting me, deliberately, as though aware of my intentions. I jiggled it, pushed harder, tried every trick I knew, but nothing worked. The knob wouldn't turn. The door didn't budge. I stepped back, letting my flashlight sweep the hallway, searching for some rational explanation. Nothing, just peeling wallpaper. Shadows pooling in the corners, and the faint hum of the neon sign outside filtering through the thin windows. But I couldn't shake the sensation that something was inside, something aware, something waiting, patient. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing at first, just the dull heartbeat of the building itself. But then a sound, soft, almost imperceptible, a breath, slow and deliberate, exhaling just behind the wood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I took a step back, trembling slightly, but the sound persisted, rhythmic, measured, like a pulse. I tried the radio, voice low. Dispatch, Unit 12, Room 6, still locked. No one inside. I think something's here. Static answered, unhelpful, distant. The manager's voice echoed faintly behind me, soft and anxious. Sheriff, maybe you shouldn't. I ignored him. I had to know what was inside. I had to face it. I circled the door slowly, shining the flashlight along the edges, searching for a gap, a weak point. The beam caught something moving in the corner of the door's surface, a shadow shifting, though nothing should have been there. I blinked and it was gone, but the feeling didn't leave. The room was breathing, alive with intent, and it was aware of me. I remembered the first night, the whispers, the faint footsteps, the impossible reflections. The room had claimed a presence then, and now it was holding itself just out of reach, daring me to enter. The air around the door grew colder, heavier, like a living thing pressing against my chest. I pulled my jacket tighter, gripping the flashlight as though it could protect me from what waited. I tried again, firm, deliberate. The knob refused. I leaned closer, whispering, I know you're in there. I know you're listening. I'm not leaving until I see you. My words sounded foolish, almost childish in the echoing hallway. But the truth was that I needed to assert some control, some small measure of authority against the thing that waited beyond. A sound answered me, a soft tap, then another, irregular, almost human, but I knew better. Human footsteps were never so deliberate, so perfectly timed, so precise. They were a message. I see you. I hear you. I know you. The flashlight beam swept across the door again. There, for a heartbeat, I saw movement, a shape shifting behind the frosted glass near the top. Tall, slender, impossibly still. Then it vanished. My stomach turned over. Every instinct screamed at me to step back, to leave, to run and never return. But something compelled me forward. Morbid curiosity, stubbornness, the need to understand. I leaned closer, pressing my hand against the wood. It was cold, not just cold in the normal sense, but the kind of cold that seems to seep into your bones, a chill that vibrates through every nerve. The breathing behind the door grew louder, heavier, deliberate. It wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was patience. Pure, patient awareness. I stepped back, gripping the flashlight tighter, trying to reason with myself. It's empty. It has to be empty. There's nothing there. But the whispering in my mind, the memories of the first night, the impossible reflections, the faintest echoes of voices, told me otherwise. This room had a memory, a presence that refused to be ignored. I circled again, examining every crack, every scene. My mind raced through scenarios, maybe a hidden space, an intruder, a trap, but none of it fit. The sensations, the sounds, the way the door resisted, it was beyond logic. I could feel eyes on me, just behind the wood, watching, judging, waiting. A soft scraping noise made me jump. Something shifted inside, deliberate, like it was moving just enough to remind me it was there. I pressed my ear to the door again, breathing. Not mine, not human, not entirely. A slow, measured rhythm that matched my own pulse, but was separate, alien. I tried the flashlight against the peephole. Nothing, just darkness. But the darkness felt thick, almost tactile, as if it pressed back against the beam, absorbing it, shaping itself around the light. I stepped back, hands trembling. The room was alive, aware, and I was a trespasser. I radioed dispatch one last time, voice tight. Unit 12, Room 6, impossible to enter. Something inside the where watching. Static crackled, then a distant acknowledgement. I didn't need their response. I knew they wouldn't understand. No one could. I took a step back, lowering the flashlight. The hallway felt quieter, stiller, yet I could feel the room pulsing behind the door. Each thump of my heart echoed in the wooden frame, answered by the deliberate, patient breathing inside. I stepped away, not running, but retreating carefully. The manager's anxious gaze followed me. I didn't speak. Words would fail to capture the presence, the awareness, the inexplicable weight of the room. Outside, the neon buzzed. The air smelled of rain and wet asphalt. I lit a cigarette, though I barely tasted it. Staring at the locked door, the feeling of being watched lingered, pressing against my back even as I moved down the hallway. I knew the room hadn't changed. The presence hadn't left. It waited, patient and deliberate, behind the locked door, observing, calculating, aware of every breath I drew. Even now, thinking back, I can feel it. The room isn't empty. It never was. Something lives there, something patient, something that exists just beyond perception. And I know that the next time I, or anyone, tries to enter, it will be waiting, ready to remind us that some doors are never meant to be opened. I couldn't shake the feeling as I approached room 6 that night. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and mildew, the kind of stench that lingers long after a building has been abandoned for weeks. The neon sign outside flickered faintly through the grime-streaked windows, casting pale, unstable light across the corridor. My boots echoed softly, but each step felt louder than it should, like the building was listening, waiting for me to make a mistake. The door loomed within the hall, ordinary and yet impossible. Ordinary in shape and structure, impossible in the way it seemed to resist my approach. Locked, of course. I tried the knob, but it didn't move. Nothing did. The door was like iron, unyielding, almost conscious in its defiance. I could feel it pulsing faintly, a vibration that wasn't quite the building settling, nor the wind outside. I leaned close, pressing my ear against the wood, trying to hear the breathing I was sure lingered just beyond the other side. But this time, the silence was heavier, denser, as if the room itself had sucked all sound into some unseen void. I took a step back and shined the flashlight along the hallway walls. And then I saw it, scratches, at first, I thought it was graffiti, the work of some bored teenagers or drifters passing through. But the marks weren't random. They were deliberate, jagged, as though etched with care and intention. They crawled up the walls, twisting in strange, unfamiliar patterns, like a language I couldn't recognize. My throat tightened as I leaned closer. The lines twisted and turned in ways that made no sense, angular yet organic, as though alive. I traced the scratches with my fingers, hesitating as it would beneath the paint felt cold, almost wet. A shiver ran down my spine. These weren't recent marks. Not entirely. They had layers, some older, some fresher, the wood itself scarred deeply. And beneath them, I could almost hear whispers. Faint, like someone speaking in the distance, yet just beyond comprehension. I stumbled back, fumbling for the radio. My voice sounded hollow, small, swallowed by the heavy air. Dispatch, Unit 12. The hallway, the walls, scratched. Language don't understand, need guidance. Static answered, unhelpful, empty. The scratches were everywhere along the hall now. Or at least, I felt they were. The light from a flashlight caught them differently with each sweep, making them shift slightly, or maybe it was my imagination. A pattern seemed to emerge as I walked slowly down the corridor, following the jagged lines. A shape, a figure. No, not a figure. Letters, symbols, a message I couldn't read. I tried to rationalize it. Could be old marks, decades of decay, paint scratching away over time. Could be vandalism. Could be anything. But my instinct screamed at me that this was different. Deliberate, intelligent, and somehow aware that I was looking. A soft scraping sound made me spin. My flashlight swung wildly, catching the edge of the wall. Then nothing. Just a hall. Empty, silent, yet pulsing with some unseen presence. I swallowed hard, feeling sweat prickling my brow despite the chill. I pressed closer to the door at the end. Room 6. Locked, sealed, waiting. And now, the scratches seemed to concentrate there, almost like they were crawling toward it, pointing, guiding, demanding my attention. I couldn't look away. Every instinct told me to flee, but something compelled me forward, toward the unknown, toward the language I couldn't understand. The whispers grew stronger as I neared the door, low, incomprehensible, a rhythm more felt than heard. My pulse matched the cadence, hammering in my chest, and I felt the brush of cold air, faint, unnatural, rising from beneath the crack of the door. I ran my fingers over the scratches again, following the jagged path with careful precision. There were repetitions, patterns that made no sense in any language I knew, yet they felt purposeful, like warnings, like instructions, or maybe like a record of what had happened here. I shined the light against the wall once more. The longer I stared, the more I felt I could almost see movement within the lines, tiny shifts, subtle undulations, as if the scratches themselves breathed, pulsed, lived. My stomach churned. I stumbled back, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was an illusion, my mind running wild after too many nights awake. Too many shadows and empty buildings. But I couldn't deny it. Something had carved these marks. Something had written them intentionally. And something was still here, still aware, still watching from behind that locked door. Room 6 wasn't just a room. It was a focal point, a gathering place for whatever force had been leaving its mark for decades, patient, silent, intelligent. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly, the shadows elongating unnaturally as I stood frozen, flashlight beam trembling in my grip. I could almost feel eyes on me from beyond the door, or perhaps from within the scratches themselves. The sensation was suffocating, oppressive, like the air itself was watching, waiting. I pressed my hand to the nearest wall again, tracing the jagged patterns, trying to understand, trying to make sense of the language. I couldn't, but a single thought echoed clearly in my mind. They are aware of you. You are noticed. You are next. A soft scraping echoed behind me. Quick, deliberate. I spun around, flashlight slicing through the hallway. Nothing, just empty space. And yet the feeling persisted. An awareness, patient, deliberate, lurking just beyond a veil of perception. I tried the door again. Locked, unyielding. The air behind it seemed to pulse, almost breathing with intent. Every instinct told me to leave, to back away, to never come near again. But I couldn't move. Not yet. Not until I understood. The whispers grew, low and urgent now, brushing at the edges of my consciousness. Words I could not comprehend, shapes I could not name. A language older than me, older than the building, older than anything I could grasp. And somehow, I knew it was meant for me, for my eyes, my mind, my fear. I stepped back, hands trembling, flashlight sweeping the walls again. The scratches seemed to shift slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if responding to me, acknowledging me, marking me in their own way. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. The hallway was silent again. The neon flickered outside. The motel seemed empty, normal, mundane. And yet, I knew it was not. Room 6 waited, patient, deliberate, aware. And the walls, the scratches, carried its memory, its voice, its warnings. I could feel them lingering in the air, in my mind, in the small tremor that ran through my body whenever I moved. I backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight on the door and the walls. My ears strained for the whispers that had already faded, leaving only the impression of being watched. I didn't speak. There were no words that could describe it. No rational explanation would suffice. Outside, the night was quiet, damp, and cold. The motel's neon buzzed softly. I lit a cigarette, inhaling the acrid smoke, trying to steady my nerves. But the scratches, the whispers, the presence, they followed me, etched into memory, impossible to ignore. Even now, thinking back, I can see them, jagged, impossible symbols. A language I cannot read. Messages carved into walls with patience and intent. And I know that whatever left them is still here, watching, waiting, aware of every step I take, every breath I draw. Room 6 is not empty. It never has been, and the scratches are proof. Proof that something patient, intelligent, and relentless lingers behind the locked door, leaving traces for anyone foolish enough to approach, daring them to understand. I don't know what the symbols mean. I don't know what will happen if I, or anyone, tries to enter, but I know this. The scratches are alive, and they're aware of me, and some night, they will demand more than my attention. It was one of those nights where the town felt smaller than it really was. Empty streets stretched out under the weak glare of streetlights, the hum of distant traffic barely audible, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. I was cruising the usual patrol route, a cigarette smoldering between my fingers, letting the hum of the engine and the occasional static of the radio lull me into that half-drowsy state cops learn to occupy on long, empty nights. That's when I saw it. The diner, abandoned for years, as far as I knew. Its paint was peeling, the windows dusty, and the once bright neon sign above the door flickered in slow, uneven pulses. Martin's Diner. It buzzed sporadically, like a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. And yet, in the middle of the dark, quiet street, it seemed alive, almost beckoning. I slowed the car, instinctively, even though a rational part of me told me it was just a neon, just another forgotten building left to decay. But something about the way it pulsed, the uneven rhythm, made it impossible to look away. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I could feel a low vibration, like the sign itself was resonating with the empty night. The closer I got, the more I noticed details I'd never paid attention to before. The windows were dirty, yes, but not entirely opaque. Shadows seemed to move just behind them, shifting when I glanced from one side to the other. Maybe rats. Maybe the reflection of my own headlights. Maybe something else. A small hair on the back of my neck stood up. I parked a few yards away, leaving the engine running. The diner sat there, silent except for the flicker of the neon. A cold wind blew through the street, rattling the old sign. I felt drawn, like some unspoken command had been etched into the air itself. I didn't want to go in. Every rational thought screamed that I should drive on, check the next block, finish the patrol, but my boots carried me forward before my mind could catch up. The front door's handle was cold under my hand. Dust rose in a tiny cloud as I pushed it open. The familiar scent of decay hit immediately. Old grease, rotting wood, mildew. But beneath it, there was something else. Something faint, almost sweet, like sugar that had gone bad. My flashlight swept the interior. Booths sat empty. The counter's covered in dust. A menu board hung crookedly above the counter. The letters faded and chipped. And then I saw the back of the diner, where the kitchen had been. Shadows pooled there, deep and unnatural, darker than the rest of the room. My pulse picked up. I told myself it was just the absence of light, the contrast making everything seem bigger, stranger. But I could feel it. Someone or something was there, watching. I stepped closer, flashlight cutting across the tile floor. Each step echoed, a hollow sound that seemed too loud for space. I could hear the faint hum of the neon through the walls, a distorted buzz that almost sounded like words, syllables I didn't recognize. My breath came fast, shallow. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was alone, that the diner had been abandoned for years. Then I heard it, a soft click, like a chair being nudged just behind the counter. My body froze, heart hammering. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing, just the peeling paint, the rusted equipment, the dusty linoleum, and yet the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I could sense in the air, pressing against my skin, curling around my spine. I moved slowly, each step deliberate. My eyes caught a flicker in the window by the door, the neon reflecting off something inside. I turned the flashlight, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone standing there, a figure, hunched, almost blending into the shadows. Then it disappeared. My stomach dropped. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my hands. This was supposed to be a routine patrol. An abandoned diner shouldn't scare me, and yet my instincts screamed the opposite. Something about this place wasn't just old or empty. It was aware. It knew I was there. The air shifted, and I realized the neon's flicker wasn't random. The light danced along the walls, casting shadows that moved differently from the objects they belonged to. I could see shapes forming, twisting, impossible angles that shouldn't exist. I tried to rationalize, reflection, shadow, fatigue. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it wasn't just playing with light. It was playing with me. That I took a step toward the counter, flashlight shaking in my hand. Each beam caught on the corners of the room differently, revealing patterns in the dust on the floor. Footprints? Maybe. Or perhaps it was my mind insisting on finding order in the chaos. The neon above buzzed low, almost a whisper in its irregular flicker, like a voice I couldn't understand. A sudden draft brushed past me, cold and sharp, carrying the faint scent of something metallic. My head snapped toward the kitchen area. Shadows pooled there again, deeper than before. My pulse thudded so loudly I was sure it would echo in the room. I took a slow breath, telling myself to stay calm, rational, that it was just a building, just old paint and broken lights. But the hair on my arm stood, a static charge of fear crawling along my skin. Then I heard it, the softest whisper, almost too low to catch. My name, clear, unmistakable. My knees nearly buckled. I spun the flashlight around, catching only the empty booths, the peeling counter, the grimy windows. And yet the whisper came again, closer this time, more deliberate. I staggered back, tripping over the edge of a loose tile. My flashlight slid across the floor, catching the corner of the back room. There was again the figure, just a shadow now, hunched, faceless, but unmistakable in presence. I felt its attention like a weight pressing into my chest. It didn't move in the way a human would. It didn't need to. Its awareness was enough. I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak, voice shaking. Who's there? No answer. Just a flicker of neon, the hum of the sign outside, the whispering air. My breath came faster, colder. I knew I should leave. I knew it. And yet, I couldn't take my eyes off that corner. Couldn't convince myself that it wasn't alive, aware, and patient. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I didn't move, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to run, but every part of me was frozen by the awareness, the undeniable sense that I was not alone, that the diner, this abandoned, broken, forgotten place, had been waiting for me, waiting for someone to notice. Finally, I forced a step back, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The figure didn't follow, didn't vanish. It simply existed, curling in the corner of perception, aware of me. The neon flickered again, irregular and uneven, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. I backed toward the door, keeping a flashlight on the room, trying not to look away. My pulse was deafening in my ears, sweat running down my temples. The whispering, faint but persistent, seemed to follow me, brushing against my mind, reminding me I wasn't alone. Outside, the rain tapped against the windows, muffling the silence. The neon above the diner buzzed and flickered, calling out in uneven pulses like a heartbeat. My boots hit the pavement as I finally stepped away, keeping the door in sight until I got into the car. The engine roared to life, my hand shaking on the wheel. Even as I drove away, the flicker stayed with me. That rhythm, uneven, deliberate, alive. I knew the diner hadn't been empty, and I knew, in the quiet pulse of that neon, that it was waiting for the next person to follow the light inside, to listen to the whispering air, to notice the shadows in the corner. And I knew that if I ever went back, it would remember me. I told myself it was just a neon from the diner earlier, that my imagination was playing tricks on me after a long night of patrols. I'd driven past it once, twice, trying to convince myself the place was just empty, abandoned like the town said. But tonight, something had changed. Maybe it was the pull of the lights, the rhythm of the flickering sign embedded in my mind. Or maybe it was just bad timing, being awake at the wrong hour. Whatever it was, I found myself back at the diner, the rain-slick streets reflecting the neon in fractured, jagged lines. The door creaked open easily, as if expecting me. The smell hit first. Something sharp, acrid, almost sweet under the rot of the old kitchen. Dust rose under my boots in little clouds, and my flashlight flicked across the counters and booths. Everything was in place, or as much as decay allowed. But then I saw it. Coffee cups, freshly poured, steaming gently in the dim light. The aroma hit my nose before my brain could process what I was seeing, warm and bitter and impossible. Steam curled upward, rising and lazy, twisting tendrils that disappeared into the shadows above. But the place was empty. Absolutely, undeniably empty. I stepped closer, heart hammering. There was no one behind the counter. No sound of machines. No smell of brewing. No moving of anyone who had set the cups down. I reached out a hand, hesitating for a second, then touched the rim of one of the cups. The ceramic was warm under my fingers, and the liquid sloshed slightly with the motion. My pulse spiked. This shouldn't be possible. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, convinced I was dreaming. But when I looked again, they were still there. 5 cups on the counter, steam rising lazily into the dark. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. Could someone be hiding? Was it a prank? A squatter? But the place had been sealed for years. And even if someone had managed to get in unnoticed, why the theatrics? Why the perfect alignment of cups, the quiet, the careful placement as if they were waiting for me? I stepped back, shining the flashlight around the room. Booths empty. Tables dusty. The floors creaking softly beneath my boots. The back kitchen area loomed darkly, shadows pooling like ink, and yet the smell of coffee was unmistakable. Familiar, comforting, even in a way that made my stomach twist with unease. I leaned closer to the counter, flashlight in one hand, the other hand hovering near the cups. The steam drifted toward me, carrying with it the scent of warmth and something else, something metallic. It made my stomach churn. I wanted to run, but a part of me was frozen, compelled to watch, to understand. Then I noticed movement, or thought I did, a faint shifting, like a shadow passing behind the back counter. My breath caught in my throat. I called out softly, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice sounded foreign in the quiet, loud in the stillness. No answer, just the hiss of the rain outside, the gentle bubbling of the coffee steam. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a pipe had burst in the kitchen, sending heat up through the building, making the cups warm. Maybe there was a heater somewhere I hadn't noticed, but the smell didn't fit. And the arrangement. The cups were lined perfectly along the counter. Someone had been here. Someone or something had been here very recently. I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. The room seemed to shrink around me, pressing close, heavier than it had when I'd walked in. I could feel the weight of the air, thick and charged, like static before a storm. The faint flicker of the neon above cast erratic shadows, and in one corner of my vision, I swore I saw movement. Something crouched, still watching, but when I turned, nothing was there. I stepped closer again, carefully, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The steam from the cups swirled lazily, catching the light in soft halos. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get out, to never look back, but the pull was stronger than fear. Something about the warmth of the coffee, the suggestion of presence, made me stay. It was almost as if the diner were alive, aware and greeting me. The whisper came then, low, almost inaudible, carried on the faint hum of the old building. I froze, straining to hear. My name, my voice, calling me softly from the corner behind the counter. I whipped around, flashlight slicing through the dark. Nothing. Booths empty. Dust motes floating in the light. But the sense of being watched was palpable. Sharp. Immediate. I tried to talk myself down. It's nothing, I whispered to myself. Old building. Heat. Maybe a rat. Maybe it's just your mind. But my hands shook, flashlight wavering, as though even I didn't believe the words I said. The air seemed to pulse around me, carrying that faint metallic scent, mingling with the bitter coffee aroma. I took a hesitant step toward the back. The coffee cups trembled slightly on the counter, though no one was touching them. My stomach twisted with a mix of disbelief and fear. It shouldn't be possible. Nothing about this diner should be possible anymore. And yet it was happening. The cups, the warmth, the presence. Someone or something was here, invisible, deliberate, aware. I reached the counter, hand hovering above a cup again. The warmth radiated through my fingers, seeping into my skin. I could hear it, or at least I thought I could. Soft breathing, shallow, deliberate. The whispering name again, almost urgent this time, just beyond the edge of comprehension. My heart hammered, every instinct screaming to leave. Yet I was rooted, compelled. Then, a movement at the edge of my vision. Something crouched in the shadows, hunched, featureless, watching. The air around it seemed colder, denser. I swallowed, trying not to scream, not to run, try to remain calm, professional, rational. But rationality had abandoned me. Whatever it was, it didn't need to move. Its awareness alone pressed against me like a weight. I tried to back up slowly, keeping my eyes on the darkness. My boots scuffed the tile, echoing unnaturally. The neon flickered above, casting the room in strobe-like pulses, revealing glimpses of the impossible, elongated shadows, corners that bent against logic, shapes that seemed to stretch and shrink depending on where I looked. I took another step back, hands shaking, and the coffee cups trembled again. Steam twisted upward, almost forming shapes that disappeared when I blinked. The whispering intensified, mingling with the low hum of the neon sign outside. It carried meaning I couldn't understand, a deliberate pattern, like language I almost recognized but couldn't translate. I tried to speak. Who's here? Show yourself. My voice sounded small, weak. The only response was a gentle hiss of the steam and that faint metallic scent, curling around me like smoke. And then the figure, or the impression of it, was there again, crouched at the edge of the counter, featureless, unblinking, watching. My chest tightened, breath caught. Every nerve screamed at me to leave. I stumbled back, almost knocking over a chair. The figure didn't move, didn't vanish. It simply existed, curling in the darkness, aware of my every motion, marking me in some invisible ledger. The neon flickered, the steam rose, and I could feel the weight of that presence pressing down on me, making the floor feel hollow, the air thick. I bolted toward the door, not looking back. Rain had started again outside, tapping against the windows, masking the deafening silence inside. The neon flickered in one last pulse before going dim, leaving the diner dark, still and empty, or so it seemed. I climbed into the patrol car, heart hammering, chest tight, hands shaking. The diner sat there behind me, silent except for the hum of the sign, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Those cups, that warmth, that presence, it hadn't left. It never would. And I knew deep down that the diner would wait for the next person, the next patrol, the next curious soul to notice the impossible in the ordinary. Even as I drove away, I could feel it, watching, waiting, and the bitter, impossible scent of coffee clung to the edges of my mind like smoke. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining it. After the coffee cups, after the cold warmth that shouldn't have existed, I kept telling myself the diner was empty, that I was tired, that the hours on patrol had frayed my nerves into raw edges, leaving me prone to seeing and hearing things that weren't there. But the laughter didn't belong to imagination. Not really. It belonged to something else. It started as a faint echo, almost lost beneath the hum of the neon outside and the occasional drip of rain from the leaky roof. A light, tinkling sound, like a child playing at a distance, but sharper, colder than any childhood giggle I remembered. I froze, flashlight raised, pointing toward the kitchen at the back of the diner. The door was closed, solid and old, paint peeling from decades of neglect. But the sound, it came from behind it. I stepped forward, boots creaking on the cracked linoleum. The air felt heavier, charged with an almost electric tension. My hands shook slightly, whether from fear or the chill that seeped through the floor, I didn't know. The laugh came again, soft, deliberate, and impossibly close. It was everywhere at once, the walls, the ceiling, even beneath my feet. It pressed against my ears like a hand, insistent, insidious. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling. It sounded foreign in the quiet, alien to my own ears. No answer, just that laughter, now carrying the faintest edge of mockery, like the building itself was amused at my hesitation. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. The coffee cups, the whispering, and now this sound with no source, intent behind it, malevolent in its clarity. I stepped closer to the kitchen door, flashlight illuminating the dust motes swirling in the stagnant air. The laughter stopped the moment I neared, replaced by silence that was almost worse than the sound itself. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to call again, to demand a human answer, but even I knew it was pointless. There was no one there. I wasn't expecting someone there. And yet, the sense of being watched intensified. The door creaked as I nudged it open, half expecting to find an empty room. The kitchen was ordinary. Stale air, rusted appliances, counters lined with grime and remnants of years gone by. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, and yet the faint echo of that laugh lingered, as if bouncing from corner to corner, lingering in the shadows like a predator stalking prey. I shined the flashlight around, lingering on the cupboards, the empty sink, the broken refrigerator that hummed faintly despite the electricity long cut off. And then it came again, a giggle, soft but distinct, this time right behind me, almost in my ear. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing, empty walls, dust floating lazily in the beam. My heart raced, a heavy, insistent drum inside my chest. I moved cautiously, boots scraping against the worn floor, flashlight swinging in slow arcs, searching for the impossible. The sound shifted, coming from above. The kitchen had a small loft storage area, a ladder leading up to a shadow platform. I swallowed, dry throat constricting as I climbed, each rung protesting beneath my weight. The beam of light pierced the gloom, revealing crates and old supplies, but nothing more. No movement, no life, just shadows. And the laughter again, now from above me, though nothing was there. I leaned over the railing of the loft, trying to rationalize. "There's nothing here," I muttered, louder than intended. "There's nothing here." My words fell hollow. I could feel the walls closing in, the ceiling pressing, the air itself heavy with expectation. The giggles became a pattern, soft and sharp, skipping like broken records, echoing through every corner of the kitchen. And I realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't just imagining. Something was here, aware of me, watching, waiting. I stepped back from the loft, boots sliding on spilled dust, heart hammering. The sound moved again, this time behind the refrigerator. I approached cautiously, flashlight slicing the darkness. Shadows pooled around the appliance like ink, thick and unnatural. Then it happened. The laugh came from the fridge itself, impossibly close, almost inside my skull. I stumbled back, hands on the counter, trying to steady myself. Rational thought fled. Every instinct screamed to leave. Every rational explanation I could muster collided with the truth in my gut. This was not human. This was not imagination. The laughter carried intent, malice, and was aware of me, studying me, toying with me. My pulse spiked, and I felt the nausea of fear settle deep in my stomach. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my voice failed. It was swallowed by the room, absorbed into the walls, the ceilings, the very floor beneath me. The laughter escalated, rising in pitch, faster now, overlapping, echoing, as if the kitchen itself were alive, mocking me for having dared to enter. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a chair, flashlight swinging wildly. Then silence, sudden and absolute. My ears rang, heart pounding my chest. I could feel a presence behind me, though no figure appeared. The temperature dropped, breath visible in the beam of my flashlight. And then a whisper, low and deliberate, from the corner behind the sink. My name, not the usual call of a co-worker or dispatcher. Something lower, older, edged with amusement, as if the building itself had learned to speak. I spun, searching chest tight, throat dry. Nothing. The light illuminated only shadows. Dust motes floated lazily, unchanging. Yet I could feel a weight pressing in from all sides. The sound came again, laughter interspersed with whispering, moving around the room as if the kitchen itself were alive, bending reality, taunting my senses. Every step I took toward the door met resistance, not physical but mental. The air seemed to thicken, the shadows stretching unnaturally, contorting with the flicker of my flashlight. The laughter shifted, now coming from above, below, all around me, impossible to pinpoint, impossible to ignore. I stumbled backward toward the exit, boots scraping, flashlight beam trembling. The last thing I saw before reaching the door was a shadow at the edge of the loft, crouched, featureless, unblinking, its presence undeniable, and then it vanished, leaving only silence, thick and suffocating. I didn't stop running until I was back in my patrol car, doors locked, engine running. Rain pounded the roof, masking the quiet of the diner behind me. But even with distance, I could feel it, aware of me, waiting, patient. The laughter echoed in my mind long after the diner faded from view, a reminder that some things in this town were not meant to be understood, only survived. I drove through the night, windows up, radio off, hands gripping the wheel tight. The diner sat behind me, silent and empty, but I knew better. The laughter, the presence, the impossible warmth of cold coffee, all of it waited for the next person, the next patrol, the next soul curious enough to step inside. And when they did, it would be waiting. I shouldn't have gone back inside. I know that now. My instinct screamed it as I stood in the drizzle outside the diner, neon light flickering like a heartbeat above me. But something, call it curiosity, call it stubbornness, drew me back through the cracked glass doors. The night had pressed in heavy and damp, and I could still feel the echo of that laughter from the kitchen, like it had seeped into my skin, into my bones. I wanted answers, though I knew better. Inside, the diner was cold again, though the old air conditioner must have long since died. Dust hung in the light beams, moving lazily as if nothing else existed. But there was something, movement. A figure sat at one of the booths near the back, hunched over a plate of food. My flashlight caught in the corner of my eye, and when I blinked, it was there, clearly visible. The smell hit me first. Iron copper, like blood mingled with something burnt. I stepped closer. Hello. My voice sounded thin, foreign in my own ears. The figure didn't move, just hunched over the plate, eating. One hand lifted, bringing a forkful to its mouth. The shadows swallowed its features, but I could feel eyes on me, unseen yet insistent. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. There was no sound, no fork scraping plate, no chewing, nothing. Just the motion, the slow, deliberate bite. I stepped closer, heart hammering. The smell intensified, a metallic tang in the air that clung to my nostrils. Sir, ma'am, anyone? Nothing, just a figure, hunched over the plate. I could see the glint of something wet, red perhaps, in the dim light, and then I realized I couldn't see its face. It was shrouded in shadow, featureless, but somehow human, and somehow wrong. I reached the booth, every nerve screaming to turn, to run, to leave the diner and never look back. But I had to know. I had to see. I leaned forward, flashlight beam steady. The figure lifted the fork to its mouth, paused, and then it was gone. The plate was empty. The fork hovered midair for a fraction of a second, then fell to the floor with a clatter that sounded far too loud in the quiet diner. I staggered back, heart racing. My mouth tasted iron, copper, like I just swallowed a drop of blood. I coughed, fingers trembling against the edge of the table. But the figure wasn't gone entirely. I could feel it, its awareness, like a weight pressing to the room, through the air, bending it around me. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop staring at that empty plate. And then it happened. The shadows moved. Not like shadows should, not like light bending over objects. They stretched, rippled, forming the outline of a human figure crouched over that plate. A breath hit my neck, cold, metallic, tasting of the last bite I had taken. I spun around, but the diner was empty again. No sound, no movement, only the lingering scent of iron and something ancient, something hungry. I stumbled to the counter, flashlight beam shaking in my grip. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that I was trespassing in something not meant for human eyes. And yet, my curiosity, my stubborn need to understand, kept me rooted. The figure returned, or had it ever left? I couldn't tell. The plate was on the counter now, empty but for the fork. My fingers brushed it, cold metal, and the taste, iron copper, again burned my tongue. I backed away, breath shallow, eyes scanning. The diner seemed to expand, the shadows stretching toward me, closing in slowly, deliberately. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes, the sensation of being studied, dissected by something not human, and the smell of the food of the last bite filled the air again, stronger, more pungent, as if the figure's presence had seeped into the very walls. I tried to speak, tried to make sense of it. Were you? My words faltered. My throat was dry, constricted, as if something in the air itself resisted my voice. The plate wobbled, then tipped slightly, as if an invisible hand had nudged it. The smell of blood was overpowering now, metallic, iron-rich, filling my mouth, my nostrils, my lungs. And then a whisper, low, sibilant, that sounded like my own voice twisted. Taste it. I staggered back, knocking over a chair. My flashlight beam swung wildly, catching the booth in the corner. And there it was, the figure. Hunched as before, a fork poised over the plate, head tilted, watching me. I swear I could see a faint shimmer of eyes beneath the darkness. Tiny points of crimson light. The air seemed to pulse, thickening around me, pressing in, pulling me forward against my will. I tried to run. My boots scraped across the linoleum, my flashlight bouncing across tables and chairs. The figure followed, not in the way a human walks, but as if the shadows themselves were moving, bending around it, elongating, twisting. Each time I glanced back, it was closer. I could feel the presence pressing into my mind, whispering, coaxing, hungry for me to understand what it had eaten, what it had left behind. I stumbled toward the exit, fumbling with the door handle. The glass was icy, slick under my fingers. I pulled, shoved, finally wrenching open. Rain splattered onto my face, cold and welcome, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave. I turned back once. The diner sat silent, empty, neon flickering like a dying heartbeat. And yet I knew it had not gone. The taste lingered in my mouth, iron, copper, dread, and I could feel the memory of that bite, that last bite, pressing against my senses. I got in my car, shaking, hands slick on the wheel. The road stretched ahead, empty, wet, and glowing under the sodium streetlights. I couldn't stop tasting it. Iron, copper, something older, something hungry. And I knew that if I turned back, if I even thought about stepping inside again, it would be waiting, always waiting. The diner behind me seemed to breathe, exhaling the scent, the memory, the presence. My eyes darted to the rear-view mirror, and I swear I saw a shadow hunched over a plate, a fork lifted to its mouth, waiting for the next bite. But when I blinked, nothing. Only my own reflection, pale and sweating, haunted by the memory, tasting the last bite, and knowing that some things are never meant to be confronted, only remembered. The rest of the night passed in silence, punctuated only by the occasional gust of wind against the car. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see it. The hunched figure, the plate, the fork midair, the taste of iron and dread still heavy in my mouth, refusing to fade. I didn't sleep well. I don't think I'll ever sleep well again. Some things leave a mark beyond sight, beyond memory. Some things leave a taste. And that night, that diner, that last bite, it left a taste I'll carry forever.